I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the VonDubCast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 10 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the VonDubCast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great too. All right, welcome to episode number 78 of the VonDubCast. Another great episode for you guys. If you guys have listened to any of the podcasts that I've done with Peterson Pals alumnus, I don't know, members, I don't know what the right word is, Ethan and Sora and a couple others, you'll hear a little bit about what the Peterson Pals group is. And if you listen to this episode, you hear about it. It's just a Facebook group that was created kind of for university age kids that are frustrated with the censorship and the lack of free speech and these discussions that they want to have, but they feel like they're being barred from in the very place that these conversations are supposed to be had. So they created this Facebook group to bring these like-minded people together and allow them just a free space to have these types of conversations. And in having these guests on from that group, you got to see the type of people that it's bringing in. And I've had some amazing conversations with these people. And the person who started it all, Alex Robbins, who I interviewed today, that's why I was excited to get her on. So not only did she kind of start the group and start bringing people in, but she is the administrator. She approves all the posts that go in and does, I don't know how she has time for all of it. It's like hundreds of posts that these people are through. It's a pretty decent sized group, and it's very, has a lot of engagement, we'll say. And she just handles it amazingly. We talk about it in this conversation and just what goes into that and how tough that is and how crucial it is to have somebody in that role if you're going to try and make something like that work. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So in having these guests on, one thing that kept coming up, and I had asked Alex months ago, but she was working towards law school and wanted to make sure she was accepted and stuff, and didn't come on a show like this and give them any ammo in case they did want to make it difficult on her. Not that I don't think anybody in the university system has listened to my little podcast, but I digress. So I talked to her, but then time and time again, I would have this great conversation with Ethan, and then before we're going, the topic of Alex came up, and just the way he talked about her and just how in what high esteem he held her. I was just thinking, oh man, like I was already excited to have Alex on, but now I'm even more so. And then it happened again and again. And every time I would talk to somebody, we'd have our conversation, and at the end of it, somehow Alex would come up and they all just speak with such reverence of just what a special human being it was. So going into this conversation, I had some really high hopes, and it was knocked out of the park. Unfortunately, the Zoom is a little bit funky. There's times I'm not sure how it comes through on the recording, because as you guys know, I hate the sound of my own voice and I hate everything I do, and I don't want to listen back to these podcasts unless I'm forced to, so I don't usually get to hear. But there was a couple times where it broke up a little bit, and I just kind of waited for it to catch back up. I hope that it kind of figures that out on here, but apologies if there's a little bit of unsyncedness or gaps in conversation at times. I would do these in person if I could. Zoom is kind of the only opportunity for these right now, but hoping as things open up, I can start bringing more and more guests in and maybe get a studio space more locked down, so that I can just plan these out further ahead and try and get them all in person and just save the Zoom ones for the people that we really can't make it happen if somebody's out in Zimbabwe or something like that. Yeah. So I really am excited for you guys to hear this conversation. I think there's a lot to learn from it. I think somebody with the mindset of Alex is so powerful. I think it's very similar to my mindset I have now, but it's so much more powerful when she's in the place to do something about it, right? Like I had all these feelings and would have loved to have a group like the Peterson Pals group when I was in university, because I felt all these things, but I just felt like I was lost and I was alone. And she talks about that in the podcast, about just that feeling of not feeling alone once they found this group of, it's not just you feeling frustrated and like you can't talk, and that you'd be demonized even for, bringing up your opinion. And I think that's awesome, and I would have loved it. But it's great to hear somebody as young as Alex and a bunch of these kids, right? Like Ethan is, I don't know, what was he, 19? Like, and to be already thinking of these kind of topics and have such a well-rounded view on it. And I just think that's great, and that fills me up with so much hope for the future. And I think seeing people like Ethan and Alex and all these guys and Sora, I just can't wait to see what they do in the future, right? Like they are so capable and have such a good head on their shoulders that I imagine just whatever they put their minds towards, if they really work hard at it, they're going to be, a giant of their industry, whatever that industry is, right? Like Alex is getting into law, and that was really fun to talk law with people. The Innocence Project, things like that, where, it's something that's very personal to me, and have someone like Alex that it's very personal to her too. You can have these types of conversations. It's got me really excited to get somebody on from the Innocence Project and have a conversation with them, because it's something I'm so passionate about. And I just think that they need to be elevated. Their voice needs to be elevated as loud as it can go, because it is such an important issue that so many people, I know there's a lot of important issues and it's hard to prioritize one over the other, but sometimes it just speaks to you personally. And that's one that speaks to me. And if I can help make it speak to other people that maybe it wouldn't speak to on its own, but through me it can speak to them, that's important too. And I just really had a lot of fun with this conversation. I think Alex is just extremely bright and just extremely creative, and there's so many superlatives I could throw out there and it still wouldn't fully encapsulate it. But I think that's what I like about this podcast is it's like I want to tell you just how great this person is, but I can't do it in 10 minutes in the intro. But luckily I have 3 hours to let them show you themselves. So if you don't want to take my word for it, just listen to this episode and listen to the passion and the excitement and the viewpoint and the maturity. And I think there'll be a lot of good stuff to pull out of that. So hope you enjoy this. Might have another episode for you guys this week. I have so many plugged up and booked in. I know I have a busy summer coming up, so I'm trying to balance this, keeping a backlog so that if I go to BC for a wedding or something later on in the summer, I have some backup episodes. But then it's also this feeling of, oh, I love all these episodes. I want to get them out. So I want to release like 4 episodes a week just to get them to you guys. Like this Alex's episode was, I don't know how many weeks ago now. And it's just getting released now. And I have so many that, I wanted to get out there. So we'll see. You guys might be getting a couple 2 or 3 episode weeks here coming up in the next little bit. And I'm just going to keep interviewing like as fast as I can and get as many blocked up so it doesn't matter. And I can release 3 or 4 a week and have a backlog. So that's my plan. Hopefully you guys come along for that ride with me. What do I say in all the intros? I should write this down somewhere because I repeat it every week. All the things that you guys got to do. You got to follow the Instagram page. Go over to the Twitter page. Follow that. Go to the YouTube channel. Follow that. Leave a comment. Like those things. Do all those things. Share a post if you see it. Those are all great. I think I'm a bad podcaster and I don't promote this, but I think you're really supposed to is going on to like Apple Podcasts and leaving a review. If you leave a 5-star review for the podcast, I think that's really a heavy thing in their algorithms on their podcast platform. So that goes a long way, but that's a lot of effort. And you know what? If you're too lazy to do that, I don't blame you at all. I wouldn't want to do that either. I have done it from some of my favorite podcasts in the past, but it's not that easy, and you kind of got to search and find it. So don't worry about that. If you want to be a lazy person, just follow the Instagram. That's all you got to do. Everything else kind of floods from there. All those other things are just a bonus. So if you guys could do that for me, I appreciate it. And in return, I will keep trying to get better at this and bring better and better interviews for you and bigger guests. And we'll keep partying all the way. Oh man. Was this weekend a party? I had so much fun. We had a surprise bachelor party for my my new brother-in-law and our upcoming brother-in-law. Fiance-in-law? I don't know. Whatever he is. We had fun. We had a bunch of people over, not a bunch of people over, and had a fire outside and played, lawn darts and sack toss, and just to be around people and to have a few White Claws and just celebrate with family. Like, it's family and indirect family, but that's all family at the end of the day, right? Like just depending how you label it. But it was an amazing thing that I knew I was missing, but until you feel it, you don't know how much, right? And I think that's going to be with a lot of things with COVID. I think that's going to be a feeling that a lot of people are having of just not realizing what they missed about certain things here and there. And I think just being around people and being around family and just feeling that love emanating from everybody and that nothing matters. You make a fool of yourself. Who cares? Because we all love each other and we all don't care. We're just having fun. It's just such a cool feeling. And it was so good to just refill on that this weekend. And hopefully that brings us into a really good week and we can keep carrying that forward all the way through the summer and more people can experience that. So that's my thoughts on that. And other than that, I will see you guys in the outro. And then other than that, I'll see you next Monday or I'll see you later this week. We'll see. All right. Bye, guys. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Alex. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's a couple months in the making.
A couple months. Yeah, and it's been quite a few months. I've already had on a few guests from the Peterson Pals group just to let people know kind of how we got to know each other. I was just on Instagram one day and I saw Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson's daughter, post about this group on Facebook. And I'm not really a Facebook guy. I barely ever use the app, but I thought, I'll check this out. Just kind of a couple of things she threw out about it, just heterodox thought, like, bringing together some people that see the world through a certain lens. And I wasn't really sure exactly how that would manifest in an actual group, but I thought I'll check it out. And I hopped in it, and it was a really cool group of people that had some really cool discussions, and it was so open, and it was, it felt like something that is lost from the world, and there's a real desperation for myself. And I think for a lot of people, and you could see everyone be so excited to find this open area where no topics are off limits. And I'm just curious from your side, because that's kind of how I found it, but you seem to be the I don't know what the right word is, the linchpin of the whole group, the creator, the almighty, the lobster goddess herself.
Yeah, the lobster queen.
Yeah. And I'm just curious how that all came about.
Yeah. Okay. It's a pretty funny story.
Yeah.
But essentially, so just like a little bit of background, I go to the University of Toronto, which is where Dr. Peterson, of course, taught. I actually took some classes in his old classroom. So I kind of got to stand where he stood and take in the aura. But anyway, so I'm in the pre-law society, and I had a relatively like high-ranking leadership role in what's sort of called the moot portfolio. So mooting is like mock appellate court. So I'm going into law. So this leadership role was super important to me. I was a team captain. I took my role very seriously. And there was a person there who found out that I was not necessarily of her, political stance. I was very into Dr. Peterson. So she decided, and she was my superior in that group, and she decided to take it upon herself to sort of spread that around, talk a lot of smack. And that would normally not strike me, but it was, to me, it was like, this is my professional space. So for you to sort of take like personal vendettas and things and bring them into like my own role where I have so much pride really struck a chord. And maybe I was hungry and tired, but I got very angsty. Yeah. And I DM'd Michaela on Instagram and sent her I hope that nobody, I mean, some of the group members must have seen it, but I sent her the angstiest message, and it sort of just ended with a thank you. I didn't expect her to ever see it. And I just said, thank you for continuing to do what you do. Cause even amidst all this chaos, I can always come back home and like watch your videos. Yeah. She responded in a couple hours. Yeah. But not only did she respond, but she screenshotted my message, posted it on her story for her. How many followers does she have? 300,000. Something crazy. Lot. Yeah. And she put a little, those little question boxes. And she said, everybody drop your usernames. I want you guys to meet this girl. I want her to have, more like-minded friends. Right. And then she didn't message me. And then a day later, I look and I see 13 plus messages from Michaela Peterson. So I go into my DMs, and she has sent me screenshots, and each screenshot has 10 usernames on it. And she sent me like 20 of them. Yeah. So I went in manually, took each individual username, followed the people on Instagram. They had to accept my follow request. And then I would send them this copy paste DM. And then I created a Facebook group. So that was like the first wave. Started super small. And then she messaged me and said, how's it going? I said, it's great. And then she said, let me join. So she joined the Facebook group, and then she posted the link on her story. And I think that's when you joined. Yeah, that's when I joined. Yeah. So so we call that the second age. Oh, okay. Second wave. I gotcha. Yeah. And then from there, it's just grown organically with people like adding it. So that's what happened. Wow. That's cool how it all came together, and just all those little pieces and all the people that had to throw their little 2 cents in. And then for that all to land, what is cool to me about that story is that if that was anybody else that sent that message that she did that for, maybe they didn't take that next step of, creating a group with it, of taking the ball and running with it. And to see you over these last 4 months and what you do and how you run, if a ball is given to you, how you run with it, right? Which is something that I'm interested to talk to you about within the group, and kind of how you've done that within the group. And that seems to be a big part of who you are in wherever you apply yourself. But I find that so cool that you needed something in that moment and she provided. And then what you did is just turn that right around and find all these people that needed that exact same thing and provide it on a bigger scale within a similar vein, and allowed that. And just to see what that's grown into. Is that something that always came natural to you? Because it seems like, whether it's law, whether it's this group, whether it's extracurriculars, you're someone that does something all the way. Where do you think that came from? Boy, that's a good one. That's a toughie, hey? That's a toughie. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's like one of the best compliments you can get, I think. So I appreciate it. I would say probably parenting, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later. Oh yeah, I'm sure we will. Yeah, but I've got parents who don't take crap from anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm an only child. That's probably important information. So I spent a lot of time alone when I was a kid, and my parents never, ever allowed me, and this is just all conjecture, I think this is where it came from, but I don't know. My parents never really allowed me to complain about things. So, you know, they never told me, for example, that I was going to have a rough time in the world because I was a girl. And you know what ended up happening? I didn't have a rough time in the world because of, you know, my experiences. So they sort of told me that the world was my oyster from like age 2. Yeah. So I just assumed it. And then I guess that goes with like other values too, of like leadership, and stuff like that. Maybe that came naturally, but I think they played a big role in it because they just sort of instilled those values of hard work and not letting anything beat you down. And what is the saying about getting back on the horse? That was my childhood right there. All right. That was the gist of my childhood and what I learned from my parents. So
that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's kind of a running theme that you see, whether it's parents or something else, but having that instilled in you that the world is your oyster and that you don't have to take shit from anybody, because I got that in a very similar way, right? Like I get that from my dad. Is he did it in a very, he never really said that, but just with the way he operated in his actions, you could see that, you know, nobody ever talked to him a certain way. And I've definitely taken that in myself. And I feel like that was something growing up I really struggled with, was that, you know, having that strong set of values internally, that when you see that not match up with the external world, the red flags go up and you say something, right? Like I was not the most glowing student grades wise and like all that. I was great, but I would always get into it with teachers and always authority figures. I had a real struggle with it. And I feel like it comes from that. And I love that so much about myself now, that I was able to bring that forward and still have that inner child, that inner voice that just, hey, this isn't right. Hey, I'm going to question this. I question everything. And I feel like that is what, you know, I feel like it's so hard to nail down the essence of what's that common thread that ties all these kids together that have joined this group? That's something I've thought about a lot, because it seems like there's people from all over the world, from all different walks of life. And it's hard to put my finger on what that is. And it seems like just that ability to question, and not just the ability, but the want and the drive to question these things. And I feel like that is so important. And that rings through into so many other areas of the life. And I'm curious for you, someone that maybe was a little bit more a part of it and is still more heavily involved, because I find I just can't have the time to, there's so many awesome, amazing discussion threads that hop up in that group that I want to dive into, but I'm a terrible typer and I take forever. This is my medium, talking. My voice is my fingers, not so much. That's one thing. And then just the time commitment. I find it's hard to keep up with everything, but for someone that has been not forced, I'm sure you enjoy the role too, but you, with your role within that group, you see so much more of it. I'm curious what you think those common threads are, and what do you think is uniting all these people that are hopping into this group and having these types of conversations without it devolving into that ad hominem, typical social media stuff that you see? I'm curious where you see it.
Yeah, I think you've pinpointed one that I didn't actually think about prior. So the questioning thing's got to be one of them, for sure. I
think so.
But honestly, I think the other one, yeah, it's got to be. But the other one is also just simply diversity of opinion and tolerance. So these people are just tired of being told what to think, how to speak, what to say, what words to use. So quite simply, they literally just want to learn, which is so sad because so many of them are university students. So I would just say a complete tolerance. And with that comes a lack of sensitivity, right? So these people are tolerant for whatever ideas come their way. They want to hear them. They want to share their own. They want to have their ideas changed. We could talk about that. I've had some really serious ideas of mine changed through the course of this group, which I think is wild.
That's
so
awesome.
I would say that. So I guess, free speech, really.
Yeah. And I feel like you really stumbled upon, but brought up another really important point, is that frustration with the status quo and what we're seeing in the world. And that was one of the biggest things I saw right away. And it was something that I got to see with the demographic of the group. It's a lot of younger people. I would say the average age is probably, right around that 18, 19. I feel like I've seen kids in there as young as 16 having these really high level intellectual conversations. And it's like, oh my God. Selfishly, I think back to, fuck, where was that when I was 16? Like, that's what I needed in Slave Lake, Alberta, where I felt so unable to have these types of conversations with anybody, right? Like, I love my friends and I love my friend group, but our conversations were a lot different. And I love those conversations too. Don't get me wrong. I love talking about, quadding and drinking and girls and all that stuff. I definitely am a caveman through and through. Don't get me wrong, but I also have, a philosopher side and these sides. And it's so amazing to see that given to these people. But, and then the other piece of it too is, where was this when I was 18 to 23 or whatever I was in university? Because I feel like another thing I'm seeing is these people that are in this group talking about, like, on campus, what they're seeing and being told to think and all this stuff. And I remember feeling those exact same frustrations when I went through, and having no other outlets and no other discussion areas to kind of talk about, hey, are you seeing this too? Or is this just me feeling it? And I feel like I came up with my own way to kind of fend it off. And I became very good at finding out what they wanted to hear, not intellectually, not buying into it whole hog, but being able to put on a facade of, hey, I'm all for this same stuff you guys are. I'm not questioning it. I'm going to write my paper as if I'm completely in your identity, but inside it kills me a little bit, but I know just what needs to be handed in for the marks. And now I see these people that, and this has happened a couple of times in the group, and I love to see it, is someone will bring up an actual example. Hey, this happened in the classroom today. This is what I think. This is what the prof is telling me I have to think. Is this worth it for me to stand up and be that person? Should I? And I love that, because to me, I never made that call. I never really stood up. Every once in a while, but I found quite early that you're just going to get beaten down. But to see them even say, like, hey, this one's probably not worth it. You might want to write it in, but we hear you and we see what you're saying. Hey, maybe take this. Maybe you're missing this one. And have all that person is looking for in that moment is to discuss this openly, to be right or wrong. And what that group creates is just a space for them to say, hey, am I crazy here? Or is this, am I being forced into thinking this certain way? And you can say yes or no, but it's so cool to see. And it's something that I think is lacking on campuses right now. And you get to see this thirst for open discussion, and just a group like that being so, seeing what comes out of a group like that really shows where the gaps are in the university system and what is missing. And it used to be, if you went to university, that was where you're going to get this discussion and get to, let your free thoughts fly. And now you're seeing that there's this huge thirst for it because it's been tamped down and you can't have free discussion. So I'm curious to ask you, someone that is still in the university system and around them, other than a group like this, what other ways do you think we can bring that back into universities? Because that was my biggest gripe about the university experience. Other than the fun I had, I always say, caveat this with that I had so much fun for those 4 years, but the actual learning itself, I didn't take much out of it because they didn't allow you to learn. They just said, this is exactly how to think this way. And I just could not do it. So I had to just, like I said, put on a facade and pretend I was getting on with it and just kind of get my way out of there, get my piece of paper and run.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's comforting to know that this has been going on. Wow. I'm about to call you old. I was going to say going on for a while. And then I was like, oh no, I'm calling him old. No, I'm just
worries.
Kidding. Yeah, I mean, I echo that experience completely. You just took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I'm going through. And it's exactly how I felt. It's, this all culminated. This was not just one person irritated me by talking about me. It was a prolonged, and that was like, the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've seen the same things, and I don't know if this is a terribly hopeless answer, but I hadn't seen a solution prior to the group. I had not. However, since making the group, what I've seen is that there's so many of us, and it's just so hard to tell when you're in the university setting, but you don't realize how many of us there are. So let me give you an example. So in the group, as I said, we're at a space where it's not a public group. I don't post the link places. The way that I'm growing it as of now, it's organic. So people know a person, they add them. And I think that that's fine. I'd rather it not be 10,000 people, maybe down the road. But I think as of now, it's intimate and that's great. But that same pre-law society I was talking about has this one person in it. And I actually coached him this year. So he was like my mentee. Right. I told you in the same leadership role. So anyway, I was looking through my invites, people inviting other people to the group, and someone that's in the group invited him. And I was like, oh my God, you're one of us. Yeah. So I actually thought about it for a second, because I was like, okay, this is two worlds are going to collide. And I don't know if I want these worlds to collide, because I keep this so secret.
Oh, really?
Anyway, yeah, I do, because, the climate is so hostile. Even just the name Peterson Pals comes with assumptions that shouldn't be made, that are completely ridiculous. But regardless, I DM'd him. And I was like, hi, I own the group. I'm going to let you in, but you're sworn to secrecy. And he said, okay. But just that moment really hit me in the face, because I said, this tiny little pre-law society, there's someone in there that thinks like me.
Mm-hmm.
And they know another person in my university. So there's so many of us. We just don't know because we're all quiet because we're tired and we don't feel like going through the hassle of speaking up. So long-winded story to come back to my original point is that I really do think the solution is finding a few people in groups like these saying, we go to the same school, let's start a club.
Mm-hmm.
Let's agree that we're going to have each other's backs. Let's write an open letter to the dean about our concerns. As soon as you have more than one person, people are not scared anymore. It's the feeling of being completely alone.
Right.
So I've seen a few groups like that pop up at U of T and at York University. So I'm hoping that that's the way to do it for students to band together, create student clubs, and sort of fight back. Because again, like we're the ones paying money, right? So if enough of us band together, we can have an influence. It's the silence that's the problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. And I definitely echo that sentiment because that was one of the first things I thought when I saw that group and saw the types of conversation. It was like, oh man, I'm not so special. There's so many kids, right? Like even you said you'd listen to the episode with Ethan, who's another very vocal member of the Peterson Pals group, and to see him at such a young age compared to me. I mean, I know it's not that big of a difference, right? He's young, I'm young, we're all young, but to see those ideas and to see echoed so much of the same frustrations, and almost it was like stepping back in a time machine, having that conversation with him and seeing where he was at, and also at the same time how much further ahead he was than where I was at that point, and how many more of these things it took me years past that to figure out. But what I got from that was just such a sense of community to know that, oh, there's a group, like these things, these thought patterns that I thought made me so special, and this questioning, this thing that was always within me is within so many people across it, right? And it's not like it's a group that was like you say, it's not like it's advertised all over the place. It's very organic in how it grows, but that shows that the type of people that come into it. And then when we would interact and do those Zoom calls and you get to hear all these people speak and hear their stories and how similar it is, it's very enlightening to see that. And I feel like that is something where the overbearingness of certain narratives with social media these days, and how all encompassing it can feel for one narrative or the other. If the right people get behind them, if the right corporations get behind them, they can seem like everybody thinks this way and I'm the only one on the other side. But when there's that much money and not that much capital in promoting these narratives, you can make it seem like everybody thinks this way, when really the majority of people are more nuanced than that. And it's a nice realization. It's one of those things that I think you almost need those real world examples like something like this to see it, even though intellectually you should know it's true and you should know these people are out there. But there's such big things at work to make you feel like you're the only one that isn't on board for all of this new age shit coming through that they're trying to push, especially on campuses. And I think that is what's so special about the group, is allowing 500 kids to all feel that I'm not alone feeling at once, and then to have resources and watch parties and Lord of the Rings memes and all that stuff to get them through that time. Because I think that is important, and that's what I've mentioned a couple times in the group too, is to mention these kids that are, and I say kids, and guessing, knowing I'm only a couple of years older, but that, it gets better. That campus experience, what you're going to feel for those 4 years or 8 years or whatever you are, is a very different thing than when you go into the real world. And what you're doing is still important, because more and more so that campus, these things that are happening on campus is coming into the real world, and you are the people that are going to be the ones that can stand up to it. So it is important, but maybe it's not the time to win the fight. Maybe it's time to learn and to get through there. Like I did, get that piece of paper. And then when you get out into the real world where there's consequences and not so many, holding of hands and safe spaces, that you can bring forward those ideas and what you've learned in, having your ideas pressed and having those hard discussions with people. You're going to be so far ahead of everybody else that's just entering in, assuming that the world is nerfed and easy as they thought it is, and what the school kind of teaches you that it is. You're so much farther ahead. And I love that this allows a resource for people to get through that tough period into the real world without, getting beaten down by all this feeling. Because I remember feeling that exact thing, like, man, this is tough to get through. I'm just told what I have to think and I don't agree, but there's no outlets to say anything else.
And you know what the interesting thing is too, is that I didn't realize before the group that it's an end in and of itself. Like I didn't really care that much about defeating my professor or getting the school to change its ways. That'd be great. But my anxiety and my angst and my frustration was eased so much simply by just being able to come home and even laugh about the ridiculousness, right? I used to get so mad, and it's like, I can talk to my parents. They think the same way as me, but that only gets you so far, you know?
Yeah.
So even this is providing people like an insane amount of stress release, right? Because when you're in that angsty moment, you think you want everything. You think you want to absolutely tear down the system, and you're frustrated, but then you come home, you post whatever ridiculous email your professor sent you. I've gotten many. You rant a little and you feel so much better. It's just being alone that is the problem. So even that, I can just die happy knowing that I provided that for somebody, you know? And they've provided that for me.
Exactly. And you get to see so many people enjoying, where someone will post, you know, a meme that really, you know, encompasses all this thing that everybody in this group is feeling. And it just hits that right level, and everyone gets that release, and everyone's commenting like, oh my God, this is genius. Like, this is what we needed. Like, this is the only laugh I've gotten today. That is so powerful. And it is cool that you get to be a part of that. And I feel like what also is cool, and again, I'm going to compliment you again, just to let you prepare you, because I know usually people like me and you, we don't do too well with the compliments. But
I know it's awful. It's like, oh, stop.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what is so cool is that there's only usually what I see with Facebook groups, or what I have seen, is that to have a Facebook group, you need an admin. To have an admin, you now add a power dynamic in, and 99.9% of the time, without fail, it turns into a shit show, because they get hopped up on that power. People push against that power. They put them into positions where they want to test the boundaries. It's just human nature, and it devolves into shit, right? Even totally innocuous groups, like I'm in a podcast group for the hosting service that it does, has a Facebook group for everyone that uses the same hosting service for troubleshooting and stuff. And you get to see the absolute wars that people go to with these admins, because they're so drunk on the power, and it's so silly, and it happens every time, even though it's over nothing. But what I've seen from you is that you pretty much let anything through. And as long as, I don't know if you've ever blocked any, I'm kind of curious to ask, but you just let everything run through. And what that allows is now it's completely self-policing. Now it's not, you know, you and a team of admins that are above everybody else. It allows you are on the same level as everybody within this group. Anybody can elevate themselves, right? I mentioned Ethan earlier. He's very vocal and is known in it because he's commenting on a lot of things. There's a lot, we could name probably 4 or 5 people that are very vocal in the group, and they almost elevate themselves by the content of their ideas and the amount that they put out there to other people that are struggling with issues, that put out if you're putting out lots of, you know, answers to their questions and trying to help people through, you elevate yourself. And it just creates this ecosystem of equality and almost meritocracy that I haven't seen on the internet in a really long time. And I think it's really cool. And I think I think a huge piece of that just goes to that decision you made. And I'm wondering how much of that was just stumbled upon because that's just who you were, or how much of that was with forethought before, of like, I'm going to create a group with no rules and no overbearing and no admin stuff. Like, was that really pre-planned, or is that just kind of how it fell out?
I love this question. I have so much to say about this.
Well, let her buck.
Okay. Yeah. So it was planned.
Yeah.
What I will say is, I don't trust myself to filter content. Who am I to decide?
Nobody should.
Nobody should. So me or the next Joe, Ethan, Cole, it doesn't matter who. Mm-hmm. No one can decide what people should see, what they shouldn't be able to see. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's that. But what I do pride myself in, and I do trust myself in, is being able to click buttons. I'm kidding. But it's a really easy job to release the posts. Yeah. So I do trust myself enough to know that I'm emotionally regulated enough to not care and not be hyped up on that power and just do the job. And as you said, 100% let the ecosystem just rule itself. So I'll give you an example. Near the beginning, I had an inkling of that little power thingy because I had maybe about 35 people reach out to me wanting to be an admin. And I was so staunch, and some people got really angry at me and got very offended that I said no. Yeah. But I said, look, if I end up needing help at some point, I will do it. But I could tell that it was not everybody. I hope that people, like, not all the requests are like this, but a few were very much, didn't seem to be like, I want to help. They seem to be like, oh, I want to make decisions. Yeah. But the thing is my role is really not a decision maker at all. I don't make any decisions. So to answer your question, every single post goes through. I only have 2 rules about that. So duplicate posts, I get tons.
Yeah.
So we all love the same things. So for example, if Dr. Peterson posts a video, I'll go to the pending posts and 10 people posted the video within 5 seconds.
I bet.
So for that, I just do first come, first serve.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, of course, if we get some sort of like hateful, like really hateful, obscene, and there's been moments, and I've yet to have one. So I haven't declined a single post based on content.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, Nick, there have been moments where I have looked at the post and I've said, oh, I don't like this one, you know? And then I've sat on it and I said, just let everyone, let it regulate itself. And every single time I've been happy with that decision.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what allows this group to sort of function properly. So yeah, in terms of posts, I don't regulate anything. I think that's the only thing I trust myself to do, is to not regulate anything. And then obviously events, like that's a thing that I'm way more active in. Like I decide what events we have and like all that stuff. I take feedback, but that's more organizational, I guess you could say.
Well, that's kind of right where my questioning was going down that route, was then the events, because that was the first thing, was now this is this group that brings people together. But then as I joined, what I found within the first week was there's different events going on. There was, there's posts going on where someone will throw something out like, hey, who wants to have a discussion on, I'm trying to think of something spicy that has been discussed, like something
abortion.
Like abortion, right? Like, yeah. And there'll be, text threads and people going back and forth, but extremely professionally and not attacking and asking genuine questions. And you see people that have these really strong beliefs on both sides, but being respected, and the type of conversations you get to see come out of nowhere. And that it's so refreshing to see that, because we're so devoid of that type of conversation in day-to-day life. It seems so much more jarring to see it happen, right? Because we're just so far removed from it. But then there's also watch parties and actual like verbal discussions and debates that you're entertaining. Where do you have the time for all these events? How do you come up with the events? Where, like, what do you get out of running all these events? I'm just curious about it, because it seems like to me, if I was in your position, I'd be doing as little as possible and just trying to get it off my plate. But it seems like you just want to bring more to the people. And what do you want to see? Is this what you want to do? Or is this what you want to do? And it seems to be creating and adding different levels of how much you want to jump into the group. If you want to join the activities, you can. If you want to just be a lurker like me and kind of, shoot some shots in every once in a while, but not fully participate, you can. And it creates an environment. And I guess maybe the question part of that would be, how planned was that? And how much did that just kind of naturally come through with how the group was evolving?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I'm a tech noob, firstly. Yeah. So I hadn't used Facebook prior to this, but I figured like, okay, I can't think of another medium where we could create a group this big. You can't do like a group chat. That's way too crazy.
Yeah.
So I kind of navigated it as I went, but I don't think I can take credit for the event ideas. I think it would have been early on where people must have said, I'd love to, meet each other all face to face. In terms of where I get the time, I couldn't tell you. I've got it all kind of, I've gotten more expedient as time goes on. So I sort of have time slots throughout the day. I have like 3 posting times. So as soon as I wake up, I go in, I release like 7 to 10 posts, tag them all. Some people have started to tag them themselves, which is so helpful for me. It allows people to navigate, right? So if you just want the memes, there's like an area on the page where you can just go to the memes. Right. If you want the spicy discussion posts, you can go to those. So I'll do that. And then like midday and then before I go to bed kind of thing. So that's easy. It takes like 5 minutes, no big deal. And then in terms of the events, I do get a lot of help. People give a lot of ideas. Most of the time, it's not me thinking of a topic. I'll see, for example, like a spicy post and say, people seem like they want to talk about this. And then the watch parties, not sure how the hell those got originated. I think I accidentally leaked my Lord of the Rings shrine, which is over there. You can't see it.
Right. I remember that.
And then we all decided, we've got to sit down and watch these.
Well, I know first there was a Harry Potter versus Lord of the Rings war that happened. That was quite enjoyable for myself.
That was maybe a week long.
That was a lot of memes. Yeah.
I'm not kidding, because that was all that people were posting about. And I said, people are going to leave. They're going to think this group is not what they signed up for.
Yeah.
But I just kind of let it go where it goes. It's honestly, more than anything, people have become such close friends, and I'm absolutely astonished. Like all over the world, people are having meetups. I'm meeting with one of the people from the group this Friday, because we just realized we went to the same high school, never knew each other.
Yeah.
So it's an astounding mix of things people need. I mean, you've got the discussion, you've got the laughs through the memes, you've got the fun stuff like hanging out with your friends, watching movies. It's it's really everything a person my age would need is there for you.
That's cool. I've never really thought of it that way, but there is, a lot to offer and a lot of different ways to dive into it. This might be an odd question, but it's something I think about. I'm a little conspiratorial minded. I'm always questioning things, and I'm always thinking, how do we know, like within this group, is everybody in the group? Like I always think, if there's 500 people in a group, 1 or 2 of them's got to be in there for nefarious reasons, right? That's always my thoughts. And I'm always thinking when I read through the posts and all the comments, some of the ones that I read, I'm like, that person seems like they might just be stirring shit, because that is a very convenient, maybe that is exactly their thoughts, but that seems like it might be nefariously posted to try and stir up hate and try and get people riled up. And what I see time and time again is that people never rise to the bait, and they answer these questions that are intentionally trying to rile it up very nicely and with respect. And I love to see that. And I'm always curious, but if I'm thinking it, I'm curious if you're thinking it. And is there anything that you go through to try and, weed those people out? Or do you ever just kind of let it buck? If they're there, they're there, and hope the group ecosystem figures it out?
Yeah, it was really a concern in the beginning. Selfish reasons and for, communal reasons, because I was like, I post less about my own opinions now. I used to do it in the beginning, but I've sort of sat back. So I talk very little in the group. I just sort of am the mediator. And I think that that's probably better. Right. But yeah, in the beginning, I was like, what if someone screenshots things that I'm saying, like sends them to my law school?
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's really horrendous to have to think about that, but I really did. And nothing is, I don't say anything hateful. It's all, but even the memes can be misconstrued. So yes, I think about it. And in terms of the people who are there, if there's people that are there that aren't saying it, but are fully just screenshotting things and sending it for whatever reason and trying to expose people, I can't control it.
Right.
I hope that it's not there. It's possible. You never know. But in terms of vetting new people, I'm extremely careful. So following that first wave of Instagram handles, and by the way, even those, it's so unlikely to have trolls because they're following Michaela, they're on her Instagram. So, it's probably going to be like-minded people, but I go into full on stalk mode. So my general lean for people coming into the group, and maybe this is a bad thing, you can give me your feedback, is I assume that you should not be in the group unless you prove to me that you should be. So there's a questionnaire. If it seems genuine, then I'll let them in. And then on top of that, if I'm a little uncertain, I go and I stalk their Facebook page. I know this sounds crazy, but you can see someone's liked pages. So if I go and I see that they're, really into Dr. Peterson, reading about philosophy, and they have a wide variety of interests, I'll be like, okay. There's been a few that have been, there've been few that seem like complete trolls. Yeah. Like a political extremist on one side or the other. That's evident on their page. And I said, no. And I just played it safe.
Well, I think that's the only way to do it. I think you have to be a little bit picky, especially at the start. I think now the group has kind of found its own identity, right? It's, even saying that is kind of funny because we already talked about at the start. It's so hard to nail down exactly what that identity is, other than people that enjoy Jordan Peterson's work, which I think is such a beautiful starting place. And I think I had enjoyed Jordan Peterson. This is kind of an interesting story. I don't know if you would have known this, but I enjoyed Jordan Peterson's work. I found him when he went on Joe Rogan. That was kind of the first. Well, no, I'd heard about him in the news being from Canada, right? I'd heard about it, but I didn't really know what he stood for. I loved what he was fighting against, and I agreed with him. Like, oh, that's a great thing to fight for. That's awesome. I agree with your points, but I didn't know him from a hole in the wall, right? What he stood for, what his ideas, what the work he had done, and then I saw him on Rogan. I was like, holy man, this guy's ideas are just, he is onto something here, and it was just so. It felt like somebody was, speaking light to all these ideas I have, but had kind of jumbled in my head and didn't have it articulated that well. And he just put it all together like he'd been thinking about this for 30 years, which he had, right? And had been really digesting this. And I thought, oh man, this guy is amazing. And I'd listened to lots of stuff. I watched lots of his lectures and that type of thing. And I got to a point, and I don't know what got this into my head, but I thought, the way I think is so similar to what Jordan Peterson thinks and what he's going for. I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice by taking in so much of his content, because I need to, we're already fighting for the same things. I don't need to take more. It almost just seemed, trying to think of a better word than this, but masturbatory to be, taking in content that's so directly lines up with my thinking. It felt off to me. So I stopped for a while, and I bought his first book, but never read it, and all this stuff. And then I was talking to somebody on a podcast who really enjoyed Jordan Peterson, was telling me, and I just said like, oh, I enjoy him too, but I don't really take in his stuff. And I kind of gave some analogy of, it feels like everybody's, felt like me and Jordan Peterson were mining at the same rock, just using different tools. And it was wasting my time to walk over to the other side of the same rock to watch him work on it when I was working on it over here. And I said that, and it came out of my mouth and whatever. And then I re-listened to it after. I'm like, man, that seems lazy. Like I should probably dive into it and do more. So I started with the Sam Harris lectures, and I started and I'd never watched those before. And it was so up my alley with so much of the things I've been looking at. And I really am a big fan of Sam Harris, and even the moderators they had were all, people I was big fans of. And I can't recommend those people enough. I've talked about it on the podcast a million times. But then I started reading his books, and that was a different level. He's an amazing orator, and he's a lecturer. And I think there's a certain magic to that you can't discount, but the preciseness that he's able to put down in those books, the 12 rules and what's the next one? Beyond Order. Thank you. I had to
Maps of Meaning too. That's his OG.
Yeah. And I have that sitting upstairs. I just got a new puppy, so I've had zero time to read, but it's definitely the next one on my list to read. But what I found was, even I, as a big fan of Jordan Peterson, was so off the mark on what he was really standing for, and how well thought out his arguments were. Like the arguments I'd seen him put forth before, I didn't realize how the depths of it. It's almost like every time you hear Jordan Peterson speak on a topic, it's just the very tip of an iceberg. And he has this huge, well thought out, just, he almost needs 3 hours on each of these topics, which I think is what he did with the rules, is, take this very simple rule and then expand on it with this really deep sense. And once I understood the depth of what Jordan Peterson is and what he stands for, and what he is trying to do in the world and what he's trying to bring forth, I had so much more respect for him. It broke my heart even more to see the hate he takes in the news when you really get to the base layers of what he's trying to do. And the third thing was just kicking myself for not diving into this long. But when I found this group, this coincided all around the same time of getting back in his work, finding this group, reading his books and that type of thing. But it made so much sense to me of, you need something so powerful like his work that does speak to so many people and speaks to these really core truths to pull this many people from this many, bounds of the earth, right? Like, I feel like if you tried to do this with another person, like if you just take Joe Rogan and tried to do, the Rogan Pals, it wouldn't be the same thing, because his ideas are so widely varied, and people love Joe Rogan for so many different reasons that it's hard to bring it back, and it wouldn't bring in the same type of people like it would. But when you get down to the common thread between all of Jordan's work, that the type of value system and the people that follow that mindset, what that creates is such a special thing in itself. I think that's what speaks to the type of people that got brought into that group. And I feel like, if anything, this Peterson Pals group is just almost a love letter to his work itself, because this is the type of people that it brings in. And it's extraordinary. The type of people that I've seen in this group and the type of people I've met have just been extraordinary start to finish. And I'm curious for you, because you get to probably have that same feeling on steroids. Who are some of these people that, like, maybe don't need to get into details on, but what kind of people have you met from this? What have you seen from the people that you've met? What kind of lessons have you learned? Because I imagine that can't be an experience that wouldn't, leave something with you as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before I get into that, what I will say is I think you hit the nail on the head with regards to Dr. Peterson and why he speaks to so many people. And I've thought about this extensively, and I think it's simply because he transcends politics. Like when you really think about it, people love to label him a right-wing extremist, which just makes me cackle every single time. But his views are really simply about, what it is to live a good life and how you should relate to people. And it all really comes back to just freedom of speech and the ability to converse, and how this is what, made human beings great to begin with, and that we're destroying it piece by piece, especially in the university environment. So I think that that's super important. So in terms of the group, first of all, it's global. So that's major. try planning an event with people in every time zone. I learned that it's physically impossible because the earth is round and the sun's always down somewhere. So we've got people from all over the world. You'd actually be surprised at the age brackets. I've looked at the stats. It is, I would say, mainly 18 to 24, but we have a significant amount of like 24 to 34, I'd say, like a good chunk. We have people in school. I'd say that's probably the biggest, demographic. We've got a lot of people that are working, but I would say most amazingly is the people that are just sort of doing, ordinary jobs, like working real hard. Like I'm trying to think of a good example. We have an astrophysicist, like we've got people from all walks of life, all brought together by this one message, people that haven't been in school for years, children. We have a 15-year-old. I won't name him, but he's my literal child. I am so protective over him because he'll send us like, group chats from what he's going through in his high school experience. And he's just getting, berated by the mob. And I see him and I thank God that he has this group to come to, because you can imagine how he might be beat down. He's only 15 years old, right? Like there's other members in the group that are twice his age. And I don't even know, he's some sort of enigma. I don't know how he came out and turned out this way at such a young age, but hopefully
good parenting.
Well, what's interesting is his parents are radically opposed to his own views. So that's amazing to me. So he's just this enigma. But we've got people like that. We've got people like you. But I would say predominantly the university students. And then we have a few, I would say this is kind of interesting as well, is a few like activists. So very politically involved. So especially we have a lot of pro-lifers in the group. So
I
they're
noticed
very,
that,
so it like totally, it's like a big thing for them, right? So they go to a lot of rallies. They're very, very well read. Maybe we should talk about this at some point, because this is something that's been in my mind recently. But an astonishing array of people.
Well, that was one of the first most interesting when the abortion topic first came up in a discussion group. And I think we've done, I shouldn't say I didn't join, but I think there's been, actual like debates and discussions in these after this fact. But the first thread that I saw, I was struck by a couple things. Firstly, how many pro-life, because I just feel like this is another one of those things that like we talked about earlier, where there's so many powerful forces on the pro-choice side that it makes it feel as if everybody's pro-choice, right? And myself, I don't even know what to call what I am, because like, if you want to get into my thoughts on the whole thing,
I'd love to. I
am so far off of both sides. Like, I don't know. We can get into it, but
we
just want to, yeah, of course. I'd love to. I've been waiting to get into these types of topics with people, but this is another thing is with this podcast, these types of conversations that you guys, I keep saying this, we are having in this group are exactly what the kind of conversations I want to have here, but it's so hard to find people that are willing, which is what it's so exciting about me having a guy like Ethan on, where I know with some of those discussions where we can go. And it's already, the table is laid for those discussions to be had, which is so nice for me, because that was one of the big things with starting this podcast is I want to get to these, I want to talk about abortion and sexuality and I'm trying to find the right words to encompass this topic, but I've loved the discussions in the group about sexuality in terms of, having the values of like family values, but without, taking away from sexual freedoms. And there's been some really interesting conversations in that. And those are the types of conversations I want to have, but now trying to rewind myself back to where I was. So I was surprised by how many pro-life people were in the group. That was hugely surprising to me that we're able to, and then how well their arguments were. I thought, man, these poor people, they are going to get torn to shreds in this conversation. And they held themselves up quite well, which was fun for me because I don't really find myself in either camp, right? Like, again, we can get into it. If you'd like to, I can go right down the rabbit hole of kind of my thoughts on it, but it was fun just as an outside observer to watch that happen and to watch when there's no cameras, no people doing it for, the usual social media things, because it's just closed off, just the people in the group. And we've already had such a sentiment of just, the only thing that matters here is the content of your ideas and how well you can back them up. And to see that conversation framed like that was a different conversation. I've never seen discussion on abortion like that. And it was so cool to see. And
was this the written one that you're talking?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first ones. It was a written one. And I think it was like the first time it got thrown out there in the group.
Because we had an in-person one recently with those same candidates, and it was wild. So we can get into that, because my I had an existential crisis after that call. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to ask you. So then with the written ones, the verbal ones that they had, how did your viewpoint on that one subject change over that with hearing all these amazing arguments from both sides? How did it pull you around? Because I imagine going through that would definitely make you give your head a shake on wherever you landed beforehand and after. Did that change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, what I'll say is I was always pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because of outside influence, but I just lean socially liberal generally.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of on that axis. So that's kind of just where I stood. So, and as you said, we're not exposed to the alternate viewpoints, which also we can get into, but that's so dangerous and so horrific because you cannot possibly defend your castle if you don't know what's coming, right? Like you're putting up walls and you're putting up defenses, but you don't know if there's 100 men coming to, storm the gates or if it's an army of 10,000 orcs, to give a Lord of the Rings example. So not being exposed to the other side is just fatal, in my opinion. And I was not exposed to the other side for many years. So I get into this call and their opinions and their arguments are completely logically sound. When I could not poke a single hole in them, I'm not kidding with you. Because their essential argument, right, is they start from this premise, and I hope I don't mischaracterize them. I'm trying to steel man their argument because I think it's very strong, is that the right to life is supreme of all of our rights. And quite simply, you become a human at fertilization, like in the sense of if you are left untouched, you will be a human being by the end of the 9 months. So anything that we do to interrupt that process is completely arbitrary. We cannot possibly pick a spot, like during a term where it's now okay. It's completely arbitrary. And I cannot wrap my head around that, but I'm still pro-choice. And so I'm currently trying to grapple with the fact that I understand that my own arguments that I have, and there might be good pro-choice arguments that I've yet to take in. That's possible. Yeah. But as of now, with the own information that I have in my head, my own arguments are not as logically sound as the other side. And that's very unnerving to me. Yeah. Very unnerving. So I'm working through it.
Oh, that's great. But I love to hear that of people if they just, like, I don't know. That I feel like we don't hear that enough. I don't know. I've been, there's been information given to me and I don't know quite what to do with it yet. I still need to grapple with it. Right. And it's funny to hear you say that because I've done a very similar thing. I'm always on the side of freedom and choice, but maybe to an extreme, right? Like I am very libertarian in my thinking of if it doesn't hurt somebody, why are you having any say in it whatsoever? Right. So I was always very much on the pro-choice side, right? Like I feel like if that is a decision you need to make, now the morality of that choice, I still think has implications. And I think if you make that choice, right, there is some still morality in my head. And I don't think it's just clean slate. Since I agree with people to have that right, I agree with what that right takes into account. And I don't think, to me, that doesn't lay claim just to say it's not even a big deal. You go get six abortions a year. There's no guilt to be had with that, right? And I feel like if people think that way and they don't, that's fine too, right? Where I get stuck in the mud is I agree where, to me, I know you can say that it's arbitrary, right? As soon as conception happens, who's to say when that doesn't become a life, right? To me, I am so far away, and people are going to hate to hear this. I think that isn't a life at that time, right? In the sense that because I think what I value more is the mind, is the psyche. And I feel like, honestly, if you want to follow that line of reasoning, and I have, and when I really thought about it and tried to find for myself of where on that timeline it becomes, I've listened to some really powerful intellects argue that it is actually after birth. It's actually sometime when a baby, it's still, like a 3-week-old baby still has not even come into its own consciousness yet, right? And I know if you follow out that argument, it goes to some really dark places, which is why I don't even like having this discussion. But that is honestly where my head goes of like, if you want to follow that rationale, and I would never, like, that's not for me personally where it is. But if you want to follow the scientific logic of how I would define that, that's where my definition would go, right? That doesn't mean, a third trimester abortion wouldn't feel, or whatever. I've known that my knowledge base is way off here, but like a really late stage, whatever that would be, I would still have some feelings about that, even though, like when I really sat with the topic and how I define it, it expanded it past that point where really, if I want it, and again, I'm trying to think this through in the moment and what this is. I think there are some ethical implications, right? Like I feel like it does become a life at some point, but really where that matters and it goes, it's something I don't exactly know how to articulate, but it's something to do with the suffering of the person. But if you aren't even capable of comprehending suffering or knowing what suffering is, if you aren't even physically capable of that until a certain point into development after birth, that logic goes out the window of what that is, other than the religious, quasi-religious argument of the sacredness of life, right? Which is another case, which then can bring that whole argument back if you want to look through that framework of it being there. To me, none of that matters because that's your choice, right? Because it is a morality call, and it's so hard to say where that morality call goes, you have to do that for yourself. Each person that's put in that situation has to make that call for themselves. And I think you should have I feel like, if you want to take that argument of the sacredicity, or that's not even a word, sanctity of life argument, that it starts right from there, I'm fully with you. But I still believe that is your choice, and that is your body, whatever you want to do. And you have to do your own morality judgment on what that does to you. And if you don't take that morality, that's on you. It doesn't matter, right? Like I'm doing a terrible job of explaining my position, but
no, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I am pro-choice, but I do think that there's a morality that you're doing with. But
yes,
I don't think we should ever tell people what their own morality wants, right? Like there's a real argument that you have a kid, that is your choice to do with that kid what you want to do, even once they're like, we're not stepping in to say you can't, now a child is born, and there's no one stepping in to say you can't fuck that child's life up from the time they're born to the time they're
true. Happens all the time too.
It happens all the time. It's one of these things. And is that not, if you know that that's going to happen, where a kid's going to have a terrible life, right? Like when you look at one of my favorite books growing up, not growing up, I think I was in junior high or high school, and I found it was Freakonomics. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It was a couple of economists from University of Chicago, and they just find these really weird economic stories to find that tell a different story than what the narrative was. And one was the huge crime drop in New York around the time of Mayor Giuliani. I think I might have my time frames wrong. It might be a way earlier New York crime drop. But what they were arguing was that it wasn't actually these policy things that they put in effect. It was that abortion became legalized in all these areas. And that had such a precipitous effect on the drop of crime, because now these unwanted children that aren't going to have the love that they need to become functioning members of society aren't being born into it. And they saw on track with that it brings it down. There's so many more arguments that go into what abortion is and isn't that don't get brought up in the main frame of it, that I just, it doesn't change my mind on it, because I've never fallen off of the pro-choice, right? Like I've had really amazing arguments be made to me why abortion isn't justifiable in any way, right? And I totally go with those options, but I feel like, to me, you still have that right. And if you can sit with those, if that morality, however you deem it, is okay with you, that's fine. But that's up to you to call. That isn't up to anybody else. You have to leave that open. And if you feel that way, then don't do it. Right. And to leave that open and to leave the most choice and the most freedom away, I feel like that causes the least harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I sort of used to take that stance as well. And I think I still do. But what I'm trying to grapple with in my head is I'm trying to find an arbitrary line. Like I'm trying to find, so we can talk about that too.
Right.
But the pro-lifers, they make a strong argument against that, which is that it's not just a morality call. Like it becomes a criminal act. It's just like murdering a fully fledged human being. So to them, it's like the government is fully justified in stepping in. Right. So, you mentioned for example, sentience. So you've got sentience in terms of understanding that you're a human being, sort of self-awareness. I'm not a philosopher, but that's how I'd sum up sentience.
Yeah.
But then the problem with that is if we draw the line there, well, we're not allowed to kill, for example, severely mentally handicapped people if they're not sentient. We're not allowed to kill people that are in a coma. So that's a good argument, right? So it's one of those things where, okay, we're not applying that evenly. And then you can go to pain, right? The capacity to feel pain. We shouldn't kill things that can feel pain. Right. But then I looked into that, and fetuses apparently can feel pain, I think, starting at 8 weeks, which is 2 months.
Right.
Right. And then you get into, okay, well, if it's just about pain, then why do we kill animals? And why is that okay?
Yeah.
So it's so hard to wrap your head around. And I'm going to run this theory by you, because this is the one that I've been grappling with that I think makes the most sense. So pro-lifers, what they always seem to come back to is this idea of the right to life supersedes all. Okay, what if we actually can say that the right to life is not necessarily the greatest right of all? So maybe when you're underdeveloped, another person's, right to bodily autonomy supersedes your right to life. So maybe, a fertilized embryo's right to life is not the same qualitatively as a mother's right to, choose her life path, especially after being raped. So to me, that is the only argument I can find that can actually attack pro-life. So I'm curious your thoughts on it, but that's what I've been working with recently.
Yeah, I feel like that's where and sorry if you can hear my little puppy going nuts in the background. She's doing some crate training right now.
She's very cute. I saw pictures.
Oh my God. And so bad, but so cute that I can't get mad at the little thing.
You can't get mad.
No. Yeah, but no, I see where you're coming from on that. And that is where I had to do some thinking, because I always felt like I was pro-choice, but I wasn't comfortable with it because of that argument itself of right. Like if that right is the highest right, or if it doesn't even have to be the highest necessarily, but it doesn't have to be of a paramount importance that it starts to supersede most other things, right? Like, and enough so that it makes a difference, right? To me, I hold both positions at the same time. That's why I struggle with, and this is why I struggle to explain people my position. I'm a pro-lifer and a pro-choicer at the same time. I'm pro-life in the fact that I do believe that life has a lot of value, and I do believe that that is a life. I always hear the argument that pro-choice people use of, if that's how you think of life, then condoms are murder, right? Like that's like that's not true, because right, like you said, if conception happens, if nothing impedes it in that time, that will become a life. So it is a different story, right? And I do agree with that, and I hold that, but then I still somehow justify my own moral compass tells me that is still within their rights, that if that's what they choose, that's what they choose. That is life. That, like life is not easy. Life is not perfect. Just because conception happens doesn't mean that there's other factors that come into place. Like, who are we to say that, I just feel like the whole thing, when you get into arguments like this, you get so close to the unknown not just the unknown, but the unknowable, right? Like something that is beyond all of our comprehension to this point that we probably will never, right? It's kind of the idea of faith is just like that. You believe in something you will never be able to understand, right? And since we're in that realm, we're never going to be able to answer these questions. So to me, I can hold both positions and just say, yes, I do believe that is a life, and that if you have an abortion, you are essentially taking a life or preventing a life to come into it. But I believe you're right to make that decision supersedes that. And I don't think that right of life, I think, and I believe that gets more and more. But to be honest with my own thought, because I've thought this through, I've also thought through the darker side of it, which I don't like talking about, because I feel like people that don't understand that this is just an intellectual pursuit will make judgments upon me, and it's embarrassing to bring it up. But like, I
won't.
Oh, I know you
like,
won't. I know. It's just this idea of, to me, in doing this, has caused me to think these other things through, of like exactly that, of like, when does that start? When does it become right? Like, I can't remember what the actual age they were talking about of when this person I was listening to, that a lot of these ideas come from, that really changed my mind on this. And I think it might've been an interview with Ari Shafir, because he's a comedian, and he had some very out there views on some of this stuff. And I think that's where some of this started. And he was talking to somebody about this. But I also think that there is certain moralities. I always thought, like, murder is awful, and is only more awful the younger the person is, right? Like, you hear of a 5-year-old passing away, and it's just heartbreaking, right? Like, you hear of a 95-year-old passing away, it's like, sad, but they probably had a good life. Hopefully
you've had your time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I always had that morality in my head of, the younger it is, the more sad. And right, you just back that all the way up, and makes the abortion argument, that's almost the ultimate sin, right? Like, this is getting worse. And that's how I thought for a long time. But then you realize that it doesn't work that way. The sadness of a death, I guess, is almost characterized in two ways. There's the loss of what that person could have been, all that they could have achieved, right? There's there's sadness on one level. And then there's this, and then there's a secondary sadness of how many people, the tendrils of effect that they have out, right? All the people that are going to be sad for that person's loss, for not having that person, right? And I feel like there's always going to be that, especially, with a child, but there's also a certain time where, before 3 years old, a kid's not really going to know all that much, right? Like if, this is such a terrible topic to have, and I feel like I'm discussing without the reverie of what it is. But it's a very different story of a 1-year-old passing. It's going to be sad for everybody else, but for that 1-year-old, probably don't know the difference, right? Like the difference between them waking up one day and not waking up one day, where you think of a 5-year-old and them not waking up one day. That's a very different experience because they have a different understanding of what this is. They're more tied. They've grounded themselves to this life that we're all walking out. When you're a baby, you're not grounded yet. You're still dependent on other people, right? Like you're almost not even a full human until you are self-sufficient to live on your own. Until, like almost you think if you couldn't be left for 24 hours on your own in a space and can provide for yourself, you're not really a human at that point, right? And these are the types of things that you go through of now is you back that up even further. And now at any point throughout the gestation process, are they even close to anywhere where they're even grounded into this life, right? Are we talking about the same thing? What is a life? When does that life begin, right? Because like there's some cultures where they don't even name a child until the first year because they obviously, infant mortality rates, and there's a bunch of other thing that comes in there, but they say like, you don't know who that kid is. You don't know if they're, what they are they attached, and they almost don't become a person until that time. And I feel like it's only semantics and what we've decided that really put that in. If you want to just look at it as first principles of when does a person really become a person, that becomes a little bit more muddier. It's not just birth. It's not a certain mark, in the gestation process. It's so hard to say. And what I just keep coming back to is you will never know that. And not only is it not sometime between this month and this month, if you want to have that argument, I think you got to say, when does that become? And it expands out way further than what you'd think. We'll never be able to know that. You are always making a judgment call that's going to have some sort of morality tied to it. That's for you to grapple with. And you should always have that right for if you can grapple with that and it's going to make your life better, their life better. It's what you have the autonomy to do. You should have that right.
Yeah. And you could even take it, there is a way, I think, and I think this is one thing maybe I don't, sorry, if I move my arm, it's because I just got my vaccine today.
No worries. You got to keep that chicken wing going. Get it going. I know,
I'm doing a chicken wing thing. Yeah. I think the one thing I don't like about the pro-life argument is that it is completely black and white, right? So they don't make any exceptions for rape cases. They don't make, even plan B to them is an abortion. So to try and find a middle ground, like to me, and maybe this is like, I bring a different perspective because I'm a woman and I understand what it is to be a woman and to make good choices, is that I think we can provide a certain window of sympathy, right? For a choice to be made. Like, for example, if it's like first 2 trimesters, it's like, okay, maybe you don't know you're pregnant. If the window was 1 month, it's like, okay, well, some women don't know until 3, right? They don't show. So it's like, okay, we can have sympathy, especially if you've done everything you can to prevent a pregnancy. And, that 1% of birth control, it gets through, you've made smart choices. So maybe we can give a little bit of leeway and then find a point where we say, okay, now you're being selfish. Maybe 3rd trimester, you're clearly pregnant. At that point, it becomes, sorry to like get into the graphics, but I've done research and 3rd trimester is when it becomes surgical, to my knowledge. So you have to physically like break the neck or puncture the head, like really horrific stuff, right? So maybe at that point we say, okay, we don't have sympathy for you anymore. You had the chance. You could have avoided as least suffering as possible by doing it early. And maybe we're going to say 3rd trimester onward is not allowed. I think that there's an inability for people on either side to say, okay, let's come to some sort of consensus here. Let's pick a line, even if it's arbitrary. Let's at least avoid as much suffering as possible while still giving the mother choice. So like, where's the line to be drawn where we can maximize both of those? That's the most practical solution, in my opinion. Yeah. Because as a woman, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't have a lot of sympathy for a person that waits until an 8th month and then wants to kill her child. To me, that's like, why are you prolonging suffering?
Yeah. And that's where I used to, I used to always kind of think that I had some line in there where, it's too late. And I'd get caught up in that. Actually, a conversation I had with my girlfriend, and she changed my mind on this, was that it was some sort of argument. Yeah. And it involved, with a rape or something. And you have to leave open
room for what that is. And that's what got me thinking of all this and really testing my ideas and stretching them and seeing, pushing on those areas to see where my own fallacies lie and where my own logic isn't the most sound. And that's where I landed on it of, to me, I agree that I would have a very different personal moral judgment on two individuals, right? One got an abortion after a month, one got an abortion after 8, right? Like just throwing two different situations out there. But again, to me, I think they should have just as much right, because I think the difference to me, because of what I said about where that goes, I think there should be a right there, but there should be a moral judgment, right? That you should, and I don't know if it should be a medical right that you can do it, and that doctors, if you can find a doctor that will do it, that they're okay morally with doing it, and you're okay morally with doing it, that should be fine. I think the fact that you will struggle to find a doctor should be the right thing, because I don't think that is right. And I agree with you on all those things. I just think that it should always go to, this is just a moral argument at the end of the day to me. And I think that is not for anybody else to say what their morality is and what we understand of cultures and what people are and situations being different, right? Like, I think the situation could be very different. Are we talking about in Canada? Or are you talking about in a very poor African country where the situations are very different, right? Like, I just feel like it's always going to be some sort of moral call of what that feels. Why is other people deciding what that person's specific situation is and where that moral judgment is? That needs to lie with them. And they're the ones that are going to have to live with it. But other than that, you should have the right to do whatever you want, right? And that is where so much of my value comes from, is just anybody should be able to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else. Now, you can make an argument that that is hurting someone else in this case, right? Like, but that's where you got to draw the line of, what do you value that as? Because I don't think that's one of those unknowable things. Nobody will ever be able to know, no matter how far science I shouldn't say that, because maybe we will, but you never know. To me, that seems to lean into that boundary of things that are unknowable, of just like, it's almost like trying to talk about consciousness and what consciousness is, right? If you want to see some smart people struggle, ask an AI scientist what the definition of consciousness is, right? Like, it's so hard even to define what it is. It's such a mystery. And I just think that by taking one side or the other in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, you are assuming you know the unknowable. To say that it's black and white on either side is folly, because you are entering a realm for which the human race is just not capable of having that. Because of that, you have to leave it open to let people individually ascribe what they will to it and let them live with that choice. And I think there should be certain things that are in mind. Like, I think you need to, but then my own argument I'm fighting with myself in my own head, because then I'm thinking, but I would still want, if I make the argument that at a certain point in a pregnancy, it's on moral obligation to find a doctor that'd be willing to do it. But then I also think that earlier on within a certain realm, I don't know what this is, it should be like a right where you can walk in and do it anywhere, right? But that kind of throws a bullet through my own theory, because if I'm saying there's a certain point where it should become harder, then that's another moral judgment you have to make. Like, this is the thing. This is one of those subjects where I still don't know where I land on it, and I struggle and I bounce all around, which is what I think you said it earlier with the pro-life side. It's very black and white, and there's no nuance to it. To me, in any subject at any point, if somebody's either shutting down discussion over it or saying that something is completely black and white, I get my hackles up. I always have. My red flags go up, and I want to fight against it, because it's never black and white. You can never be sure, right? And I feel like that is the basis of a lot of Jordan Peterson's work, is just, I'm going to try to be as sure as possible. I'm going to dig and dig and dig and dig until you always hit that point where it becomes the unknowable, right? And if you take everything in life down to the unknowable, that's when you say he transcends politics. He does, but not because he's trying to transcend politics. He's just trying to transcend everything, just to get down to the bedrock of what it is we're all doing here. And that's what happens. And I think the more you try and do that, the better off you are. And anytime you get so black and white and sure of something, you stop digging.
100%.
And with anything, you can dig down till you hit that point. And what the market, the big, as I get further into this journey of podcasting and trying to find people that would be good to have on and trying to make those judgments of character, the biggest thing I look for is the people that recognize how in touch they are with their own ignorance, right? And to know how much you don't know is such a powerful thing. And if you talk to a person like Jordan Peterson, he would be the first to say, hey, I don't know shit about a lot of this stuff. I'm trying my best. And I feel like with the pro-life argument, because it is faith-based a lot of the times, that is something you need to know, and you have to be black and white with it. And I feel like that is always the sticking point and the painful point. And I feel like that is with a lot of things with religion, you get to that point. And I think I love religion. I love what it can do, but I hate the dogmatic part of the black and white, because at the base of what religion is, it's that unknowable. It is the exact essence of what it is. If you shouldn't be sure of this, like the whole thing is based off of not being sure, because you can't be sure, because you have to have faith. And that is where I see so much. And now you see people that have lost religion, but found religion in their own things, like whether that's critical race theory or all these things that just people take on as these ideologies of them, and they become so sure of them. And now they've lost touch with the ephemeral, the everything that this all is. And you've stopped digging. Right. And I feel like that is the trap, and you see it so many places. And that's always what I'm with this podcast trying to point out, is like, hey, you stop digging there. You stop digging there. You know, like everybody's need to be in that constant trying to figure it out and test their ideas. And that's what I see in this group, is people doing that all over the place. And the easiest way to test your ideas is to have a really smart person have an opposite view and have to take it seriously. Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what we see.
Yeah, no. And I love what you said about the unknown. And I guess I'm a very like pragmatic person. That's tends to be where I lean. So when people get really philosophical, sometimes I'm like, okay, but what relevance does this have? Right. I'm that person sometimes. Yeah. So for example, with the abortion thing, I completely agree with you. We really can't know, where we should draw the line. But I guess my sort of stance on it too is that, I'd be curious to you to hear what your thought is on, why as soon as the baby is born, okay, now it's wrong. Like what the difference is there. But then I guess the other sort of follow-up question to that is, why are we so afraid of arbitrariness? Because sometimes it's the only remedy to the unknown, right? If we do not know where to draw the line, we kind of have to draw it somewhere, or we fall into one extreme or the other. We either appease all of the pro-choicers or all the pro-lifers. So to me, it seems to make the most logical and practical sense to pick a line and to try and meet in the middle and be okay with that. I mean, most of the time, arbitrariness is not a good thing, but sometimes, like, does it go hand in hand with the unknown? Is it unavoidable? I feel like it is.
I couldn't agree more. And having said all I said on that topic, I do still agree with you that the best way forward is to pick a clear delineation. Pick a spot, right? I agree. What I want to say is, let's pick a spot, understanding that we're picking a spot because there's no way to know this. And the whole argument over
I love that.
whether we can know it is just to say, there's no way we can know this. That's why we're arbitrarily picking a spot. And when you bring up the difference, of a day before birth and a day after birth and the difference there, that's actually the impetus of what got me thinking of that, of, man, what is the difference? If you think of a baby that is 10 minutes pre-birth and 10 minutes post-birth, that baby is very much the same thing, right? And that's what kind of got me into this rabbit hole of, okay, well, when does that, right? Is that sometime in the womb where that, that switch flips, sorry. And suddenly that's a life. And that's what got me down this rabbit hole of, these cultures that don't even name a child, don't even think of a child as, and unfortunately in some of those cultures, if they were infirm in some way or another, or not going to make it, there was no moral judgment on if they did, right? Like you look at ancient Greece, you look at all these, almost until the last couple 100 years, that's been pretty standard practice. And I mean, it's hard to, we're always evolving and we always need to be, evolving our standards with them, but there is some sort of imperative naturally for that. And I don't think that, if you had to really, put a gun to my head and make me pick a line with all my thinking, I wouldn't be picking post, I wouldn't put it anywhere pre-birth. Like if I really wanted to be sticking with what I think, where that becomes, right? That doesn't mean I'm out here killing babies, right? Or if I had to pick that time, I would still pick some time before that, because I think there's other arguments that come into it. And I haven't even exactly sorted them all out of where they come in, and they all kind of overlap on each other of these different reasonings why you see things these ways. But yeah, no, I do still, having said all that, think the best way forward is to just pick a line, have it be, somewhat arbitrary, and then have caveats and gray area for when it goes over the line. Because I think there's, what if somebody got raped and was locked in a fucking room and finally escaped and got out, right? Like there, you always have to leave gray area for all.
Some people don't show as well. You know, those stories of women that are maybe like a little overweight or something like that, and they just give birth and they had no clue they were pregnant. What about that? That's wild.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too, you know, to consider is that pro-lifers might think that pro-choicers just have no issues killing unborn children. So I think the important thing that you brought up is that there's a moral problem. It's not that we like it and we think it's fine, but then maybe you can sort of say, okay, we're drawing, you know, an arbitrary line. We're trying to appease as many people as possible, but let's improve sex education. You know, let's improve things around it to maybe try and sway people towards, hey, this isn't an ideal choice. Maybe we can prevent it to begin with. That's a way to sort of, you know, educate without imposing through criminal law, because that's the most serious way you can impose upon someone in society, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you would know a little something about criminal law.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, I just might.
just might. Yeah, no, that's interesting, because I always thought, you know, like, I do believe that an abortion is ending a life in some way, but I also, you know, so like in that would put me kind of in that pro-life camp. But then even understanding that, I still want it to be available, and I want that to be,
agreed.
You know, and that is me saying, hey, I do think there is a moral judgment there, but I think that you need to leave that option open that if people want to take that moral judgment on, and they might not even see it as a moral judgment. That'd be me putting my moral judgment on other people and how I would judge other people. But I don't ever want to be, I don't want that power. Not only do I not want that power, I don't want people to have that power, because you see what power does to people and the types of decision-making that happens once somebody's put in power, right? We talked about it earlier with, you know, something as silly as a Facebook admin can absolutely turn people's head in. You give people the right to determine what is going to have massive consequences for millions of people going forward. That's not something we want people deciding, really. Like, oh, it's a tough one where a decision needs to be made, but humans just aren't good at making those types of decisions. It's sad.
I agree.
It's almost a paradox.
I think, I agree. And I think, again, the solution is after you draw that line is to say, like, hey, let's just educate. Like, you can, like, we live in a free country for a reason, right? So advocate as much as you want, have your posters, teach children, bring it back to the parenting level. You know, my mom taught me about these types of things from when I was very young. So I don't think I'd ever get into that kind of situation. But if I did, having the option there is important, because, you know, I mean, pro-lifers make great arguments about the negative effects on women that abortion can have, physical effects. It could potentially have long-term fertility effects if you have multiple. So maybe, okay, let's not then impose the decision and say you can't have an abortion, but let's have more information available to women so that they can understand what this really means and then sort of deal with it beforehand. I just think education is always sort of real education, and like access to info is always the best solution in that case.
I agree. And that was something that I always thought, you know, like in my head, I thought, let abortion be legal all the way up, and then hope that the judgment of society as a whole will dictate what people do and don't do. And like you say, educate people on, you know, the effects and what that can happen, because I do think that is a big piece of it, but it's just, it's such a complex topic that I'm trying to think back to a conversation that I had with my girlfriend that really changed my decision on this, because I was so staunch in my thinking of how I thought about it should just be legal, and some of the judgment calls I was making. And she really, I'm trying to think of the words she used, because it's had such an effect on me. And I'm such a stubborn person that when somebody really changed my mind on something, it sticks out, and it's killing me that I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something. I don't know. Maybe it'll come to me as we go, but it was something to that effect where I kept framing it in the sense of, you know, I think what I was thinking, where it came to me was, I was thinking one day, and I was just sitting there and I was thinking, I was trying to put myself in the position of what would have happened if me and my high school girlfriend accidentally got pregnant. What would we have done? Right. And we had some scares, and it was one of the fucking scariest times of my life, right? When you're 16 and you're going through it. And especially if you're neurotic like me, right? Like, what do you do in that position? And what my thought was, you know what? I think I would definitely not want to tell my parents, but I would be so scared I probably would. And what would have happened is they probably would have educated me and gave me both sides and said, hey, you need to make a decision here, and they're both going to have really big consequences, and you need to make that. And I was thinking, and I just had that moment of being so thankful. I almost brought a tear to my eye just thinking about how happy I was to think that if I was put in that situation, I would have a loving support system that would help me through it. Right. Which is what, and that was what kind of the framework I was listening to. And I stopped and I just, said like, hey, Alyssa, what do you think of this? Like, I'm just so thankful. And it breaks my heart to think that there's going to be girls and young men that go through this situation and don't have that. And I feel like it almost doesn't matter what the moral judgment on, because if somebody goes through, because I do feel like sometimes the opposite. I almost wish that if somebody wanted an abortion, you need like a real pro-life and a real pro-choicer to really give both cases to them at the point and let them make a decision. I feel like so many abortions happen without fully thinking through the ramifications of what it is. Yeah. And I don't think that is right. But I also think the other way of these people being, whether it's through religious, family, whatever it is, I think there's also people that are pressured not to, when their choice, had they had the opportunity and the freedom to think it through fully with both sides educated to them, they would have made the other choice and wouldn't have kept that kid and would have been a better choice for them. And what I thought, and I was thinking about that, of just how thankful I was to have that in my life. And I was trying to think of ways that we could bring that forward, right? Like if you had a Planned Parenthood that would really educate both sides and show both sides in that light, and then let them make that decision. Because as long as it's an educated decision being made there and you are understanding what moral implications you're taking on, I'm fine with it either way. I just want it to be a decision. I don't want it to be, just not even thought about, or somebody be pressured into it, or just the narratives around you, either to one side that abortions aren't, they're like candy, you just go get them, it's not even a big deal. I don't think that's true, but I don't think, they're the devil and you can never have one. If you do, you're a bad person. I don't think that's true, but I think there's some middle ground in there where as long as they're like you say, there's education on them, you can bring them forward. And maybe that's how I got into it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll
I have a question for you. I have an interesting question for you. And then maybe we can move off this if you want to.
Of course, of course.
So interesting. Okay. So, and I know for a fact that this is relevant because I've read so many scenarios where this is how people attack their relationships. Okay. So let's say you're a dude. So I'd love to hear your perspective on it. You're with a girl for a super long time and you have all these conversations about, what's going to happen if we get pregnant, and you talk about it extensively. And she assures you, you're on birth control, right? She assures you, I'm definitely pro-choice. Like, I think I'd have an abortion. I would do it early. Like, I'm 100% sure that that's what I would do. So then based on that information, you proceed to engage in that relationship with her. Right. And then push comes to shove, it happens. And now the choice is entirely hers. And she wants to have the kid, but you don't, based on all the information. Just on the books, you have no say. How do you feel about that? Because I don't like it. Yeah. As a woman, I don't like it.
I've definitely thought this through a lot. And I know people that have been in this situation. I've seen this play out in real time, and I've seen the effects that it can have in real time. And I'm of the position that if it is discussed beforehand, and that is the expectation, and that is what the thing goes in, then I think it is on that girl in that situation to at least allow a discussion to be had, so that the other party, the dude in that situation, could at least put forward his thoughts on the situation. At the end of the day, I think that is her choice at that point. I think you as a guy have made that decision. You know what you're getting into, right? We all know, and we know better. I hate the thought of just having no say in the fact, not even at least to get your feelings hurt on what you think of it. But at the end of the day, I do just think that's their choice. At the end of the day, it's not you that has to go in and do it. And you need to support that choice regardless of which choice is made. You're kind of in that position. If you're in that situation, you have to, right? Like that's kind of my thought on it. Is I think that's unfortunate. And I just think that because it's such a big decision and it's, I don't know. I feel like I think that's what I think, but maybe if I'm trying to now force myself to really throw myself into that situation to see if that changes my mind any, but no, I think that's kind of unfortunately how it's going to be. I think that is the worst case Ontario. I think you would hope that those discussions, and I think that's just speaking from real experiences. I think there's a certain way you have to have those discussions to bring it up, because I think if you think just a flippant 5-minute discussion on what it is good enough for that, no, you need to ask some follow-up questions. If they say, yeah, no, I'd totally get an abortion. You say, oh, you wouldn't have any feelings about that. Do you think you'd struggle with that? Right. Like, and these are conversations I've had with people. You know, you have to ask that. You have to ask the follow-ups to make sure, because it's easy to say when you're nowhere close to the situation, this is the decision I'd make. You need to really force yourself into the sitting with that and really asking yourself those hard questions, because I think it's easy to lie to yourself. And if you've done that, that's a different story too. Like I think how in-depth that conversation is at the start really should dictate kind of how much say you get into it later, right? Like I feel like if you just had, like we're good, right? You know, kind of, I'm sure that's the extent of what that conversation is for a lot of people, right? I don't think that cuts it. I think if that's the type of conversation you had, her choice, you didn't do your due diligence. If you
not enough.
If you had a really in-depth conversation on the thoughts why, and that, yes, it would be hard, but I think I'd do it. I think I'd struggle. And then you have to have a lot of, I think you have to have a lot of compassion for the other side too, because one of my really close friends growing up, she got pregnant with a boyfriend, and she proceeded to have an abortion and wasn't supported the way she needed to be supported through it, I don't think, and struggled with some of the effects afterward mentally. And I have in having conversations after the fact and talking about the ramifications of what that did to her and the dark places that put her after the fact, I have so much. And this is the exact situation where they had discussed it before. And she said, and she felt trapped because she said, no, I would, like, I want to stick to my word. But when the situation was really put in front of her, she had second thoughts on it. She wasn't sure if that's what it was. And I'm sure that if they had that conversation, at least it was a joint conversation. But I think because she wasn't supported in that, the effects take hold in a different way. And I feel like just because I've had that experience of seeing firsthand what that is, I have so much sympathy for a woman in that situation that their whole life thought, I would have no trouble with an abortion. You know, like, I'm so for it. I'm so pro-choice.
You can never know.
And then you get pregnant and that changes everything, right?
Yeah.
You can never know of what you are. I think everybody's pro-choice until they're put in, or any pro-choice person is pro-choice until that moment. And then you really find out if you are pro-choice. And I think we have to have a lot of sympathy for that, because that is a real reality of, human nature, and the ability to become pregnant and to be pregnant is part of evolution. It's very deep within us. And people to think that we can just intellectually think circles around our biology is such a fallacy. And we see it happen so often that we just think we can outthink these monkey brains, but at a certain point you can't, and you need to leave the door open to that. And I think in that's where, when you stated that to me of what my thoughts are, and that's kind of why I land where I land, because my first dude instinct is to say, holy fuck, if that was me and I got put in that position, we had that discussion and you fucked me on that, and now my whole life has changed. I have that feeling too, but I feel like that is tempered by the effects of what that can do to the female that's going through that situation, and how much more impactful it is on them throughout the situation, that's kind of their rights supersede yours at that point. And your time to do that was with this decision making earlier as a guy, right? You know that because you don't have to deal with the results of a pregnancy, more or less, like in the same way, your decisions come earlier. That is your choice you've already made your choices at that point. And at the next point, it's her choice. You should have a say. Like I said, I think you need to leave the door open for a conversation there to at least have your points heard and be a part of a conversation. But I think the door's closed to you at that point. You made your decision. You made your decision weeks earlier at that point, my friend. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
What do you think of that?
I completely agree, for the sole reason that I'm generally, my mind always goes back to the law, because it's just my thing. It's what I do. Is that I'm very much not a statist. I try and avoid, like, to me, as little government intervention as possible is the way to go, especially when it comes to criminal law. So to me, it's like, okay, well, what would that entail if the dude did have a choice? You'd literally be forcing abortions on women. And that's horrific. That is barbaric. And that alone.
And happens every day.
Right. And you can't. Like, if the government's doing that, you can't. So my middle ground on that would be, because I actually work at a family law office, so I have a lot of background in that area too, is that if you've really been led to believe, like 100%, that this is what the woman would choose, and she's made that very clear, and then you've entered the sexual relationship on the basis of that, right? So you've said, okay, I'm not really going to engage in this unless you assure me, and she does assure you, and you do it. Then maybe a middle ground would be, okay, she has the choice. We can't force her to get an abortion, but you're not necessarily required to pay, for example, child support, because she's making that choice. So that's maybe where you could play with that. You could say, okay, if he can prove that, he's not entitled to support that child.
Yeah.
That's where my mind goes.
I'd get behind that for sure. That's a good balance.
A good solution.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but
we solved all the world's problems. Look at that.
I know. Look at us go.
If we did this every day, we'd have it all licked.
Always aim for the middle, I think.
Yeah. So, if we're on the subject of law, I'm curious to ask you, because growing up, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Lawyer was what I was going to do. And I was so on that path and for probably not the best reasons. I think I probably heard when I was a kid that you make lots of money, and I always loved to argue. And, that was kind of the two things in my head of, if I could get paid to argue, right? And my understanding of what a lawyer is has changed a lot, but I'm just curious, when did that dream start with you, and how's it going? And I'm also curious on your experience with the university and what you've seen so far, and then that choice to go back for more.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my journey I'm one of those enigmas that I've never strayed since I was 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Very strange. Most people around me are still like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know what I want out of life. Yeah. And it sucks. And I hurt for them, but I luckily did not have that at all. So I would say I was about 10, and I actually originally staunchly wanted to be a detective. So I would sit at my grandma's house for hours because my parents worked. So I would be in there all summer, like, day to night. And I would watch like CSI and, true crime shows, all that stuff. Maybe I shouldn't have been watching them at 10, but I did. My grandma only speaks Greek, by the way. So she couldn't understand what they were saying. So she let it slide a little bit. But yeah, so that's kind of where it started. And I would say that sort of dream lasted for a few years. And if I had to pinpoint like an aha moment, I think it would be in maybe like grade 9 or grade 10. I saw this documentary about a wrongful conviction of Stephen Truscott. He's one of the Canadian wrongful convictions. So he essentially was put away at a very young age and then later released, lost, decades of his life after they realized that he was not guilty for his crimes. And my whole concept, because I was very pro-police, I was pro-detective, I was like, good guys, bad guys. That's how I saw the law. That shattered everything for me. And I said, holy crap, these people have the power to put someone behind bars, take away their liberty, do the most severe thing, save for maybe killing them, and with pretty much no repercussions. So then I started to shift and I was like, okay, wait, who do I actually care about? And then I realized I cared about those types of people, the people that suffer from state overreach. And maybe that's where my sort of political view started on me being a libertarian, is that I was like, the government can screw us so easily in the blink of an eye. And you can't take time back, right? Like you can't take back 30 years that you spent in prison. Yeah. And then ever since then I shifted and I spoke to my dad, and this is actually a pretty interesting, like movie type of story, but my dad actually applied and got into law school when he was like late 20s. And, he had gone his whole life mainly just working, hadn't done higher education, and he was going to apply as a mature student. And he decided not to because it would have been too expensive at the time. He's 27, right? He's at the height of his corporate career. Yeah. And he wants to be a lawyer, but he just said, not worth the leap. Like, I'm not going to take the risk financially right now. And he has regretted that ever since. So some night, maybe when I was like 13 or 14, he came and he gave me that like acceptance letter. And you know what school it's for? The school that I'm now going to for law school. Yeah. Yeah. So he got into Osgoode Hall Law School and he gave that to me and he's like, this is not possible. You know what I mean? Like, this is so within your reach. And it goes back to, what my parents have always told me. So ever since then, it was like lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. And it has always been defense lawyer, defense lawyer, defense lawyer. I've never had any interest in working for the government whatsoever. I would not want to prosecute. And yeah, literally since I was probably 13 years old, I just have not faltered. I mean, 8 years, it's a long time. Yeah. So yeah. Wow. And now I'm here.
Wow. Well, that is an interesting story. That's beautiful. It's in the blood. You never stood a chance.
It's like, those long lost dreams that, you're going to pick up where your parent never got to go. Yeah. It's one of those.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then the second half of that, if you knew that was always your goal, in Canada, you need an undergrad degree to apply for law school. So
yes, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So when you knowing that law would be the next step, what went into decision making on what you would do for an undergrad? Was it just the expediency? What can I get done fastest to get it onto law? Were you looking at things that were going to help you once you got into law? What was the kind of the thought process there?
Yeah, 100% it was interest. So I wanted to be in law school right away. I was that kid that was like, I wish I could just skip the undergrad. And you know what? Yeah. I'm glad I didn't. I needed it. I built so many skills as much as I hated it. I learned a lot. But yeah, it was honestly a no-brainer. I only applied to criminology programs. With U of T, which is where I went, you actually don't apply first year. So you go into like broad social science stream and then second year you apply for your program.
Right.
But it was literally always a no-brainer. So I did a double major criminology, obviously because I had been interested in that kind of stuff from when I was young. And that major includes tons of law courses. So like criminal law kind of thing. And then the other major I did was like almost like a pre-law. It's called ethics, society, and law. So it's sort of the intersection of like law, philosophy, and people, sociology kind of thing. But yeah, that was just a no-brainer for me.
So then it's interesting you say all that, because then my next follow-up question is, when you go into that kind of broad spectrum, so that first year of just kind of whatever you call it, prereqs or whatever you have it, and you saw what the university campus life is like, the ideologies on campus, the war on free thinking. It seems that might be putting it too harsh of words, but kind of that whole thing. How is that for you, knowing that not only are you here for this undergrad, but you're going to be coming back for more later on and to get through it? Because I feel like for me, when I got to university, I was so disenfranchised right off the bat and just so disappointed with what it was. And I thought I was going to come here and meet all these free thinkers, and the free thinkers were there, but the system and the institution was so diametrically opposed to that I was really put off, and I was really disappointed in the faculty and not all of them. There were some good profs too, but for the most part, I was really disappointed in that. How was that for you?
Yeah. It was definitely disheartening. To get beat down and to constantly have to navigate, what choices do I make? Do I speak up? Do I not? There's been a few times where I've, borderline, said some things in a paper and they picked up on them. Like I've gotten comments.
Yeah.
Like I've, there's been certain words that I've used that I can't even debate the words that I used were completely reasonable. Like I'll give you an example. So when you're in prison, you're an offender. That's what they refer to, an inmate or an offender. Okay. So I used the word offender in a paper, and I was actually arguing that, prisoners should be treated better in correctional institutions. So it was a very, kind of, I hate to like categorize things left and right, but it's a sort of left-wing stance, right? We should, reform prisons, whereas the right-wing stance is more, F them. Okay. So that was the gist of the paper. And I used the word offender throughout because, they're offenders. They committed a criminal offense. Okay. Yeah. And she totally clocked me and wrote in the margins very rudely. She said, "This is like extremely pejorative language. This is my, final warning for you to not use these pejorative words." And I was like, what?
Yeah. And
are you talking about right now? So discouraging. And this goes, to what Dr. Peterson says about they try to control language use, which is horrific, right? So in terms of that, not a positive experience. However, in terms of going back for more, the way I see it is very selfish, which is just that I have to get this golden ticket. I have to get this degree so that I can actually make change. I'm not going to be one of those people with a bachelor's, not to say that it's bad to just have a bachelor's, but it's right in my fingertips, and I can do this extra 3 years of suffering to be in a position of power where I can actually, fight these types of things. Maybe not in Canada yet, but like in the States, the first of its kind, I believe, this firm just got developed. I posted about it in the group, and they focus exclusively on defending students on campus, their free speech rights. Isn't that fantastic? So like, that's something I could do. So the way I see it is like plow through the suffering and maybe behave a little differently, maybe join a club. There's one other Peterson pal who goes to that law school. And I know for a fact there's other people there. So maybe do my best, see if I can find like-minded peers, stir things up a bit. I don't know. But that's kind of what gave me my decision. I'm not going to give up now and then regret it later,
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. And I think that's awesome.
Thank
to
you.
use the, use the idea of what you're going to get out of it and what help you can do in that actual domain of what you're fighting against right now. Just, putting in your time to be able to make a difference later on. I really respect that. And I think that's awesome. And I think, unfortunately, that's one of those things where these undergrad degrees and what they've turned into these last 20 odd years is something that is, I find it negative, but I think there's an argument to be made that it's just kind of the natural evolution of what these schools are going to become when they, try and make it for everybody, right? Like higher education used to be, a bit of an elitist thing, right? Like it was for a certain subset of the population that we're going to go there. But over the years, it became, for good reason, they want to democratize education and make it more available to more people. And this might be just the natural evolution of what that looks like. But it's so unfortunate. And I wish, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast. I just wish we're not going to change schools overnight. But what we could change overnight is the idea of what we're getting out of this. I think the idea of what an undergrad degree is worth and what we're selling these kids, we're selling them a fucking bill of goods that is so far away from what it actually is. If we change the idea of what people are going to universities for and what they're getting out of it, at least they're going into it with the right idea. If you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to come out and now I'm going to get this job because I have this piece of paper, you are going into it with the wrong reasons. You are going to go to it and you're going to come out of it with some certain skills, right? You're going to know how to meet some deadlines. You're going to learn how to socialize with people. You're going to learn how to do group projects. These are admirable skills, but that's about all you're getting out of it. And then you have to take that and you have to take those skills and completely leverage that into whatever else you're going to do. It doesn't open up very many doors. It might get you a couple connections, but I feel like if we're more honest about that and people can now make, oh, am I going to be paying 10, 20, 30, you're talking in the States, hundreds of thousands of dollars to have, what am I going to get out of it? If that was more clear and more people understood that, where I didn't know, I was totally wrong on what I thought I was going to get out of my degree when I went there, right? Like I thought a business degree, like what I was going to learn and what I was going to come out of it with. And I realized I learned more working from the time I was 12 years old to the time I went to university. And I learned an entire 4 years of university, right? Like actually working in the workforce and seeing how people negotiate and that type of thing. It's so funny. And I just wish the idea of it. Sorry, where I was going with that is I feel like that is even more unfortunate in things like medicine and law, where not only what I want to tell people is if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, go to university. Yep. If you want to be anything else, try and find any other way not to go to university.
I agree with you completely on that.
Just don't do it, right? Like you're going to go get a sociology degree. You're going to go get what are you going to do? Unless there's no other way to practice the thing that you want to practice without that piece of paper, don't do it. Right. Or if you do want to do it, know you're going into it for the social factors of what the amount of fun you're going to have. Right. If that's your reasoning, I say, go ahead. I would never tell anybody. I had the 4 funnest years of my life, but that was me making the best of it because the education that I thought I was about to get was not there and was not available. And I feel like if we just change the idea of what university degrees are to people so that they're more transparent and more upfront about it, the damage being done, because I see it right now is so much suffering in the world is linked to student debt. And people, because they're not getting out of it what they think they're getting out of it with these degrees, they spend all this money and they come out on the other side and now they can't chase their dream. They can't chase anything. They just need to, stick with that easy job of what's going to pay the bills because they have this huge lump of money hanging over their head all the time. And the real suffering that comes out of that really breaks my heart. And I just wish there was some way where either, I think eventually universities are going to have to change. I think they're already kind of swirling the bowl on what they're doing due to only their own choices. And they're doing it to themselves. And they're ruining these institutions, trying to just kick and scream and claw and hold on to the positions of power that they find themselves in. You got to adapt. But I just feel like in the meantime, we just need to change how we look at them. And that is a small change we can make that would have a lot of effect and help a lot of people not go down a road maybe they shouldn't have, or they wouldn't have if they were educated in a different way. Yeah. I'm curious to ask you about one of my favorite organizations is the Innocence Project.
Yes,
I figured from what we were talking, I figured you would love them. I'm curious trying to formulate this into a question. When I started this podcast, I wanted to support certain groups, right? Innocence Project was one of them. And I was trying to find ways to leverage my voice into it. And I found that there's a Canadian version of the Innocence Project. I think it's got a different name.
Innocence Canada.
Innocence Canada. That's the one. And I was trying to find ways of bringing it in. Have you worked with them at all? How connected with them are you? I guess is the way I can make it a question.
I swear to God, we haven't talked about this before. It's wild that you're bringing this up.
I know.
Maybe somehow you did some mysterious digging that I wasn't aware of.
I swear I did not.
Yeah. Wow. Innocence Canada. So they are absolutely incredible. They have been part of the freeing of about, I'd say like 40 murder convictions for the past few decades. Yeah. Now the thing with them is that they are pro bono, right? So they've got lawyers, they've got investigators, they've got, students on there. But from what I know, and maybe I shouldn't speak for them because I'm obviously not a representative of their organization, is that the funds are low, right? They're not, people don't talk about them enough. They are not by any means smooth sailing. So that upsets me. But the reason that I got acquainted with them is because through my criminology degree, one thing they did right is they had an event where they brought a speaker on to speak to us. Her name is Maria Shepherd. Has an insane, phenomenal story. And unfortunately, crazily enough, one of the less extreme stories of all of these innocent people. So she came, and interestingly, like no one showed up to this event. And at first I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing. She must feel so bad. Like they had rows of chairs and 5 people showed up. Okay. And I was one of them because I was floored. I had been interested in this kind of stuff since I had been 13 and watched that documentary. But it allowed us to have a really intimate conversation with her. It was like 5 students and her, and we got into like a little circle and she talked to us for like a good 3 hours. And her particular story, you can Google her, you'll find it so fascinating, is that she was convicted of manslaughter of her young stepdaughter, because it was essentially this medical doctor. I believe his name was Charles Taylor. I'm not 100% sure, but he's famous because he's a Canadian doctor who screwed over countless people, and he would give false medical testimony over and over and over. And so he lost his license. Now he fled to the States. He didn't get pretty much any consequences. So he's in the States. I don't know what the hell he's doing. She was one of his victims. So he basically claimed that the bruises on this child, like the way that she died, it was an accident, right? Like this kid just died. I don't know if she fell down the stairs. There was something about a watch. I can't remember, but he testified that there's no other way. She must have killed him. She was only there for 5 years. But one of the lawyers from Innocence Canada, found her case after this doctor got exposed. So they went back and they were like, let's look at all the people that this guy has testified for. And she ended up getting released after only about between like 2 to 5 years. She didn't spend a lot of time in jail, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, compared to some of these ones
she joined the Innocence Canada project. And she's one of their spokespeople. So I haven't done any work with them yet, but I heard her story and it just fueled it more. And most excitedly, I think what I'm most excited about for going to Osgoode Law School is that they have an externship or like a clinic with Innocence Canada. And they pick 2 students. Yeah, they pick 2 students a year, and you do a placement and you like investigate, you work on the files. So you best believe I'm going to claw eyes out to get that.
Yeah, you got to get in there. And if you get in that placement, I'm going to be there asking you questions every day.
How is it? Podcast on it. Yeah. But so that's the extent of what I know about them. But I've spoken to one of the actual wrongful convictees, and was just brought to it was insane. It was one of the best experiences of my life speaking to her, honestly.
Yeah. I've listened to what I think is so cool to me is I'm obsessed with podcasts. Anybody that listens to this knows I talk about it all the time. I love podcasts, every kind of podcast. And what was so cool is seeing people from the Innocence Project bring on these wrongful convictees. And I think they have I think the Innocence Project in the States has a podcast for this, where they let these guys come in and tell their stories of how just all these different ways that that the law system failed them, and whether it's aggressive prosecutors or people that want to win these games. And one of the most impactful ones was just recently, I think Sam Harris did a really good one on this maybe. And then Joe Rogan actually had on somebody from the Innocence. I think he's had him on a couple of times throughout the years. And they talked about a couple of these stories and really let it hit home. And, Joe's crying and like, it was just so emotional. And I remember listening to it and just being so, like, what can I do? Like, I just want to I want to help, and I don't know what I can do, but just to think of, if I can grow this podcast to the point where I could start having those guys on and tell their stories and bring it to more people, like, fuck, that'd be so cool, because it's so widespread. Like the amount, like for every story you hear that breaks your heart of these people that are wrongfully convicted, there are thousands and thousands of people that nobody even knows. Nobody's fighting for them. Nobody is even aware that they were wrongfully convicted. Right. And it happens over and over again. And there's real actionable changes that can be made with the system itself that would prevent this from happening going forward. And that's something that gets me. It's not only is the work that they're doing to help the past cases that these happen, these innocent people, get them out from behind bars, but then the work going forward of fixing these holes in the system that are allowing this to happen in the first place. Yeah. Why are we playing these games where, prosecutors care more about their record than actual justice itself? Like there's holes in the system. It's so sad.
Yeah. There's so many. Oh, I could talk about this for days, but there's so many things with that. And, this is part of why I want to be a defense lawyer. Is this is more like philosophical, governmental shit. Is that, people talk so much smack about defense lawyers. They're like, oh, they're the scum of the earth. How could you do that? And it's like, defense lawyers are literally the last hope that people have against the state, this beast, this monstrosity of a power with unlimited resources. A single defense lawyer is a, innocent person's only hope. Yeah. So I have the utmost respect for defense lawyers, whether they defend innocent people or guilty people, because everyone deserves a defense. But that's always why I've gone that direction. So in terms of like the holes in the system, you're right. There's so many that could be fixed. I think one of them is, more after the fact, which is sort of access to justice, access to these lawyers, because the problem is there's so little money in it, right? So you get like Innocence Canada, you get amazing pro bono lawyers that take time out of their day to work on these huge files, but there's not a lot of funding. I think the charity should be hyped up way more than it is. I don't know how that could happen. Yeah. There's also, before the fact, I don't know if you've read about this or watched stuff, but it's so interesting, which is that a huge number of wrongful convictions are false confession cases, which people cannot wrap their heads around. But I did a forensic psych class, and I've looked into like a bunch of documentaries on this. Any person, you and I, can be put through what's called the Reed technique, which is one of the investigative techniques. I think it's banned in the UK and here, but I think they still use it in the States. Yeah. And basically it's like a 9 or 10 step thing where police officers are literally taught how to make you think that confessing to a crime that you didn't commit is the best thing for you. They completely manipulate your mind and your psychology. That's frightening. So even banning that, working on that, the other thing, I'm like throwing all these things at you, is that people are not legally literate. So for example, I'm a law student. I would never speak to police, never, under any circumstances. And most people don't understand that that should be the way that you do things. You should never speak to police. Even if you're innocent, first thing you say, give me my lawyer. Because they can, once you're in there, 10 hours in, you're gone. And your entire life could change and you can confess to something. So working on that, maybe putting in a policy to where people have to speak to a lawyer before police can touch them or speak to them,
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so many areas. And I think a big one that you landed on is that, false confessions. And I think everybody owes it to themselves to go on YouTube and watch some videos of how they go through that, and watch them take a 15-year-old kid and watch them pull a confession out of them, watch them, fuck with their minds and use psychology, and they'll go through all the tactics that they're using step by step. And it's awful to watch. It will break your heart, but you need to know that this is happening, because it happens every day. Every day you see this happen, and it's so sad to see. And these techniques are, they've been mastering these techniques for decades and decades and decades. They know exactly how to push you and prod you and use, solitude. So they'll leave you in there for 2 hours by yourself. No access to anybody. Exhaustion, lack of food. Right. And then the good cop, bad cop, they have different guys. And then one guy comes in and tells you, hey, you know what? Just tell us what you need to know. Right. If you give this confession, you can go home tonight. And they tell them all this bullshit. And it's so heartbreaking. And it's, I have a real thing ever since I was a kid with bullying. I can't stand bullying. I couldn't stand it. I've never really got in trouble with that much with teachers. Like, I shouldn't say I got in a ton of trouble all the time, but it was always, it was class clown shit and all that. But the only time I'd get in real trouble was when I would lock horns, and it was never myself. It was when I felt like the teachers were bullying the kids or taking out or holding it over them, of using their position of power. And I could see that. I always felt like I was intellectually past the age groups, right? Like when I was in grade 6, like I felt like I could talk to the teachers and they should be talking to me like an adult. Obviously, crazy psycho, ego at the ass. I'm fully, aware of that. But what I hated was to see them use their position of power and the fact that they were, the teacher in that situation, to bring things forward on these kids that knew no better, and you could see them brainwashing these kids into their ideas that wasn't, setting the table with all the options for them to make their own decisions. It was trying to force it onto them. And when I saw that, I would just go lose my mind. And every time I see that, if it somehow touches that button of bullying or somebody using their power or using their superior intellect to fuck with people, that's exactly what I see in those interrogation. And it just hits all those buttons and it just makes me see red. I cannot stand it. That's why I get so excited and why I believe in the Innocence Project so much. Actually, just recently, not to make this a sad thing, but my grandma just passed. Amazing life, amazing lady, was ready to go. Awesome, was an amazing experience. But afterwards, people saying, well, where can we send stuff in lieu of flowers? And what do you want to send things? And like, did she have any organizations that she liked to support? And I was like, fuck, my grandma didn't care what it was. Like, I can't think of anything. Like, I got nothing. But the one thing I said, if my grandma was anything, she was a valued person, she strong values. And I said, the Innocence Project, she probably didn't know what the fuck it was, but if I explained it to her, she would have loved that. Right. So I, instead of in lieu of flowers, donate to the Innocence Project, because I just think every dollar you give to them is going to be so usable, so valued. There's so many, it's so hard these days, unfortunately, to find charities where your money goes a long way. But that's one of those ones where, it is having an effect and it needs this money. And it's one of those things where I just, I think I'm definitely going to try things in the future to elevate that and maybe raise some money for them and do that thing, because it is such an amazing project, but it just doesn't get the attention it deserves until people do see it. And I think that's what's amazing. It's almost like glove in hand fit with podcasts and these stories that are available to tell of these people that go through this situation. I would challenge anybody to listen to one of these podcasts where one of these people that go through this wrongful conviction process tell their full story, and to not be moved and want to make a difference. It is so tailored for that. And maybe that's what it is. It's just, it needs this movement of, what podcasting and long form content is to help buoy and lift up this, these people doing this amazing work, because they need to be, on the forefront, and people need to be aware of the work that they're doing, because it's so important.
Wow. Yeah, no, I love that. And what I would add to that too, just real quick is, well, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. That's never fun.
I didn't even want to bring it up because I knew that's
no, it's okay. It's okay. No, I'm sorry for that. But, the Innocence Project, like Innocence Canada in particular, to whoever's watching, if you're going to donate, I would strongly suggest pool the money there, because the thing about the states that I admire a lot is they're very litigious. So for example, there's lawyers, and what they can do is they can get somebody out and then they can sue for, insane sums of money. And then you can actually cover the costs. Right. In Canada, it's not the same thing. Like there's not enough money to be made. So if you're looking at Innocence Project in the States versus Innocence Canada, like I would say Innocence Canada needs the money way more, because they're unable to get it back after.
Well, shit. So I didn't, that makes so much sense. And I just never even put it together in my head, but definitely. Oh, okay. Well, going forward, all the money is going to Innocence Canada.
Yeah. For some reason, I haven't really learned this yet. Maybe I'll learn in law school, but we're not very litigious. And then when we are, the sums are just not great. Like you look at what these people have gotten from Innocence Canada, and it's like $1 million, $5 million. In the States, it's like 30, And then it's not just to say that these people, like no money can bring it back, but you got to think about lawyers that spend years on these cases. Like the financial costs do have to be paid back. So that's one thing that I like about the States, that Canada needs a little more assistance in that regard.
And that's what I loved. I think the last one, I've listened to tons of podcasts on this subject and with the Innocence Project, but the one that got the most widespread attention was
Stephen Avery.
The one that was on Joe Rogan. But where I was going with this was, it was somebody, he had somebody from the Innocence Project too, but then it was also this guy that works really closely with the Innocence Project, but he's just some rich guy that really loves what it is. And he just out of pocket pays for all these things. And I just loved listening to him talk, and you could tell he wasn't doing it for the attention. He's been doing this for years, where he's just been privately supporting them. And if it's a case that he gets personally involved with, he just, funds it out of his pocket. And it's so amazing to me to see something like that of somebody just realizing the good that this is doing and realizing they have the resources to help move it forward. And just to say, no, like we could raise money, but I'm going to put my hand up on this one. Like he's probably single-handedly freed, multiple people just on his own dime, and to know that and to have that as a goal, or trying to think of, I feel like what's so cool lately is we're seeing these people blaze new paths for what success can be. You see somebody like Elon Musk that is completely changing what it is to be a billionaire, because you can do good things with that bill. You don't need to just collect billions for yourself. You can do it with good intentions in the world, right? You see somebody like Joe Rogan, where it's just, rolling in cash, has it coming in more ways than anybody even realizes. But what he's doing with it, he's trying to build a comic mecca where he's going to build this giant, comedy store in Austin that doesn't make any money, just wants to break even. And you can set these lofty goals with values attached to them and things like that, where I wish more people would jump onto this idea of, really balling out. It doesn't have to be cars and Lamborghinis. It can be, changing the world, like getting people out of prison, doing these things. Like, fuck, is that not much more cool? Like that'd be way better flex on the gram of, I just freed 3 wrongfully accused convicts, or you bought a new yacht. Like, fuck, is that ever cool? And I just love that idea of promoting these people that do that. To now, all it takes is one person to do it, and now there's a path. And now more people can follow that path, and more people can see that there's value in it. And that's what I get so excited about is, yeah, that's great that we have Elon Musk, but who are the 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds that are watching Elon Musk right now saying, holy shit, that's the way we can go. I don't need to become, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, and just, not that they don't do philanthropy too, but there's other ways to do it. And I just love that idea of broadening the spectrum of what this can be and bringing in more valued or like value-centric ideas of what success can be, that isn't just tied to the one value of how much dollars you have in the bank account. I just love that idea. And that was what I thought was so cool about hearing not only the stories, which are always amazing, but then to hear the stories tied to something like that, which also I think has just as much importance of spreading that message as it does of spreading the message of what the Innocence Project does itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I love that. Do you think we could take a quick break?
Of course. I'm going to pee my pants.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be right back.
Okay, cool. BRB.
Okay. No worries. But yeah, Innocence Project. I'm so glad I finally get to talk about this with somebody. One of the, hey, there you go. One of the things that I found fascinating about that Joe Rogan episode was the way they highlighted so many of the holes of the legal system, and what there's things that accidentally get people wrongfully accused, and then there's things that are actionable, that people did this. Like there are people that have denied DNA tests. They have denied these requests because they don't want to. These prosecutors have won this case, and then there becomes a request to bring up some new evidence, and they will deny it in terms to serve their record because they don't want to, have that switch from a win to a loss on their record. And that absolutely has haunted me to this day. Once I found that out, that there are people actively putting themselves in front of it. Maybe I'm curious what you think of that one aspect of it. What can be done to change that? Like, to me, my mind goes to consequences. Like if you find that somebody actively barred somebody's innocence from being brought to the fruition for their own personal gains, you should be fucking disbarred. See you later. We don't need you. Right. Like, and I know that's, it's hard to go back and, change the set and then go back from there. But, even if you said starting now, like anything from, this date in 2021 going forward, if this happens, right? Because I don't know how you go back with amnesty, if that's just the way the game was played. Maybe there's a way to go back. But then what other glaring issues do you see that are causing harm that could be changed right away?
Yeah. Okay. So with that, again, I got to make a distinction between here and the States. And this is where,
and they were talking about the States. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where I like the Canadian system, is that I actually have some sympathy just on a basic human decency level with prosecutors in the States, because they're elected. That is, they run for election. And there's studies that show that when they're up for election, they get tough on crime and they prosecute way more. Mm-hmm. So I can sympathize just on a basic level of everybody wants their job, right? Mm-hmm. But that's a terrible way to have, public officials.
You're putting poor incentives there.
Right.
And lives are at stake.
Yeah. But you can sympathize with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I don't know what I would do in that situation. If I was up for election, would I be a little more harsh? Maybe I would. Yeah. Maybe I would do things to protect my record. So removing the consequence of I could lose my job if I don't, do this, if I lose, that is like step one to me. Now, I don't see that ever changing in the States. That's something that's ingrained. It's the way their system works.
Yeah.
So I think here, that's a huge thing that we have going for us. Behind the scenes, I don't really know. Do prosecutors maybe have quotas? Probably. Do they get reprimanded when they lose? Probably. So that's maybe something you could work on. And then in terms of prosecutorial immunity, I think that's huge. And you kind of touched on that. I don't think prosecutors should ever have immunity from misconduct allegations. I think, mistakes happen, but the explanations you've given, they should never be immune from that. They should, people should never be barred from making those kinds of claims. But again, the problem comes with resources. And this is why I think defense lawyers, like really strong defense lawyers, and I hope to be one of them, are so important because they are the last line of defense. They have to be willing to do this for free. They have to be willing to get no gain out of it. And they have to be willing to face the literal beast that is the government. Right. Yeah. So I think pooling resources into that, maybe getting, a fund for, a select team of like boutique lawyers that does this and this only could be really beneficial. Yeah. Maybe it should be government funded. The government has no problem taxing us out of our ass in every other area of life. Right. Yeah. So maybe they should set up a tax funded, fantastically paid set of like 10 amazing defense lawyers that, work as this unit and will be provided to anyone that needs it. And they will work in these cases, something like that, I don't know. It's kind of a wacky idea, but
hey, you need wacky ideas. That's the only.
You need wacky ideas.
That's what keeps the world turning, is those wacky ideas. Yeah. I'm sure the light bulb and all that stuff was thought of pretty wacky at the time.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think that's, I almost wish they would do that same Joe Rogan episode. And I feel like this is about a lot of things when it comes to America and Canada, but the Canadian version, because I would love to see those same holes that they highlighted in the American system redone for Canada. And maybe I can do that here. Maybe I can find someone with Innocence Canada to come on and highlight the real issues that they're seeing here, because you're right. It is such a different system. I remember first day of my first B-Law class in university, they said, all right, we're going to just settle this here now. You need to understand that America and Canada are very different. And that's what they went over.
Hugely.
Like the difference of what you can sue for in America versus in Canada. And, you can pretty much sue for anything in the States, their legal system is an absolute behemoth in comparison to Canada's, right? And there's different issues on different sides, but I wasn't even fully, I knew a little bit of it, but to the extent I had no idea. But that also, I think, leaves you in a tough spot when you're in Canada, because your entire understanding of the legal system is, for 99% of the population, I'm going to guess, completely from CSI Miami and, Law and Order and all these TV shows that are all in the States.
Yeah.
And then something happens in Canada and your entire understanding that is already pretty weak to begin with because you got it from TV, but then now you're already behind the 8 ball because now it's a completely different system you're playing at. And I wonder what ways we could educate people on some of the intricacies of the law system that would be actionable for day-to-day life. Just like you already mentioned of, keeping your mouth shut, not talking to a cop, right? That is actionable things that people can take with them. Somebody listening to this podcast right now can take that and move forward with their life of knowing that if ever I'm in a situation, maybe that just pops up out of nowhere because they heard it here. Maybe I'm going to, I don't want to say anything. I just want to get a lawyer, which, like you say, is the best call 99
in every
times
scenario.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of it.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. But people just don't know that. And if you don't know, you can't act on it. And I just wonder what other things there are that people just don't even know that are walking around. And maybe I'll have to have you on a couple times throughout your law school and find more of these things that we can bring to the people. We can just let them know all the little tips and tricks of it. Oh, it's interesting. Hey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, that one's a huge one to me, because what people really don't understand is that the police never, I'm sounding so horrible, but they never have good intentions when they're talking to you in terms of your best interests.
Yeah.
If you're suspected of a crime, they really don't care. If you're comfortable, if your interests are being protected, they want to catch a criminal. And that's admirable in its own right. That's amazing. We need police to catch criminals, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, you need to protect yourself because they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you speak to a lawyer, right, making that your first step, 10 out of 10, always, a lawyer might say, yeah, it's in your best interest to speak to the police. I think you're credible. Most of the time, the lawyer will say, don't speak. And that's why police never want you to speak to a lawyer, because they know the lawyer's going to say, don't say shit.
Yeah.
But just taking that first step, it's not that you cannot go back to the police and speak to them after. So that, as you said, it's actionable. People should always do it. And I think for me, what I was so baffled by is that, for example, I had to take science until grade 10, like biology, learn about the cells in my body. But there's no mandatory law courses in high school or elementary school. I never had a single mandatory class. And that's insane to me, because legal literacy is crucial. It affects everybody at some point in their life. Like most people have no clue what to do if they get pulled over. They have no clue what to do if they see a crime. They have no clue what to do if, they've committed one, if they've been the victim of one. So instituting something like that, I would actually be in support of, like a mandatory, just basics, where you can just give people the rundown. Like, this is how you should interact with the law.
Yeah. And it's funny that doesn't have more steam behind it in today's day and age, with everybody trying to do things for, trying to balance the scales in terms of privilege and stuff. Who is most affected by, legal illiteracy, right? Like that has a, of
course,
if someone like myself got into trouble, even though I'm not that legally literate, I mean, probably more than the average bear, but I have the means to hire somebody to call a lawyer.
Yep.
The people that are barely making ends meet or trying to put food on the table for their kids that are it so disproportionately affects them, that those things, if you put things in place to bring these people up, would be so in line with what everybody's trying to do right now and trying to, level those scales. And it'll help everybody, but it'll disproportionately help the people that are disproportionately affected. Ooh, that is a tough word to throw out 3 times in a sentence.
No, I completely agree. 100%. And again, it's not like it's these real complex things either. It's just basic skills, like actionable things. Like, what should you do if you're faced with this legal scenario, that legal scenario?
Yeah.
How to know your basic rights, like that kind of thing. It's huge. And it amazes me that most people walk around not knowing. And then as a result of that, they always err on the side of caution, meaning the government wins. So they'll be like, okay, I'll talk because I don't know if I can or not. Right. Or, okay, I'll let you look in my car because I don't know if I'm allowed to or not. So that's a problem, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you about a couple things that you had mentioned earlier when we're talking about the Peterson Palace.
Okay.
You had mentioned that you've had your ideas changed on some big ideas throughout the conversations that I've had. I'm curious what those big shifts in your mindset have been. Like, what types of things have you shifted your position on from that?
Yeah, well, I'll see if I can think of more, but the main one is the abortion thing.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it's not that I've shifted my position. It's that I need to rework my position and I need to get a more solid basis. Because what I realized
shaking your certainty.
Exactly, deeply.
Never
so
a bad
realized, thing. Yeah, no, never a bad thing. I realized it was standing on way too firm of a ground. So that's the main one, I would say, that really slapped me in the face. But the other one is more about like intellectual humility. And I think that this group punched me in the face in terms of me realizing that I was a little arrogant before. I got so, and it might not have been arrogance. It might have been that I was just so effing jaded. I was so angry and frustrated by people telling me what to think that I was like, well, I must think the opposite then, right?
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily true. So this group has really forced me, and I'm talking both sides. Like with the pro-lifers, I had a more left-wing, or I do hold a more left-wing view. They forced me to look at things. But overall, the group has just absolutely humbled me to an insane degree.
Yeah.
It's taught me to just shut the hell up and assume that I know nothing. And it's not that I was horrible at that before. I was moderately good at it, which I think made me susceptible to people like Jordan Peterson. I had to have some level of openness to receive him, right? but it was nowhere near where I'm at now. I actively just assume in all scenarios that I should not speak on it. Like, I'll give you a fantastic example. The Israel-Palestine thing that's going on, I'm working through info, but I have not nearly enough. So I haven't said anything. And I'm just listening, and I'm just a fly on the wall, because you know what? I actually have a good example for you. I put my foot in my mouth recently, maybe 6 months ago. Do you know when Trump put Amy Coney Barrett onto the court? Yeah. How long ago was that? Yeah. Regardless, when that
6-8 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I fell into the usual trap. I read some, infographics, and I read some like headlines, and I was like, oh, she's pro-abortion. She's anti-Roe v. Wade. I read some things about her, and I posted on Instagram, and I was like, what a horrible choice. And I said all these annoying, cringy things. And then one of my friends who's in the Peterson Pulse group, this is before the group existed. Yeah. She's like one of the people that like I can talk to about these things. She kind of slyly sent me some stuff, like some real information on this woman. And I'm like legal, right? I know what it means to be a judge. I know what I think a good judge is. And she sent me some stuff, and I read it, and I realized, oh my God, I love this woman to bits. I think she's a fantastic judge. I think she's I think she's fiery. She's intellectual. She makes good decisions. And I was so embarrassed with myself. I was like, you're such an idiot. Why do you just jump on the bandwagon? So that was a big one for me. And I think I had learned a little bit since then, but the group especially, like ever since the group has started, and I've seen how intelligent people are, how they can easily sway each other, I've just learned that I need to shut the hell up in most scenarios and just listen before I form an opinion.
Which I think is...
So that one.
Yeah. And I think that is the healthiest thing you can do. And I think that can happen in so many different ways, and people find that in so many different ways. I've heard lots of people talk about jujitsu as that thing of just realizing it's such a complex thing that you can never master. And it's so humbling that when you get into that, it shows you just like, hey, I don't know shit about shit. I just got to come in, and it allows you can bring that into other areas of your life, or you can find it in anything, but it's so important. And the actionable, or the consequences of coming to that realization are going to be so actionable in your life, and you're going to get so much better, and you're going to reach so much higher heights if you can walk through the world with that idea. I always call it the white belt mentality, right? No matter how expertise you have in whatever field, just always pretend you're a white belt and somebody has something to teach you. I think that's one of the rules. One of the 24 rules in Jordan's latest 2 books is something to that extent of just assume everybody has something to teach you. Assume the person
you're talking to. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Something like that. I always have roughly what the rule equates to. Yeah. And I think that is just such a powerful thing for anybody to go through, which brings me to another question I have in the moment. Of the 24 rules, I'm assuming you've read those books. What would your favorite rule be?
Okay, I have a few.
Right. What would your favorite rules be?
Okay, admittedly, I have yet to finish the second book, so I could very well be missing one that I love. So I'm talking like first book.
Okay.
1, be precise in your speech.
Very important.
And this has something I've grappled with in the group, and I noticed that people clock each other on it, and I think that's amazing, is what are you talking about? So like we use the word leftist all the time. And I think it's okay if it's like a meme and we're making a joke. But what the hell do you mean when you say leftist? Do you mean radical leftist? Because most of the time that's what we mean. But being precise in your speech and saying exactly what you mean with nuance, not making generalizations, is the key to like getting somewhere in a discussion. So that one for me is huge, because it also forces you to think before you speak. If you have to be precise, you got to think longer. So that one. And then I think stand up straight with your shoulders back is a really big one. Because it's not, walk around with your chest out. It's not chest out. Notice he doesn't say that. It's just shoulders back, stand up straight, which I, always take as like approach the world. Don't let it beat you down, but also don't think that you're the shit. Yeah. Right. Like a nice fine balance. So I love that one. And then I think one more, watch me just list them all. You'll have to cut me off.
Fair enough.
I love treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping.
Yeah, that's a great
one. Because holy moly, do we treat ourselves like shit comparison to everybody else? Why do we do that? It's human nature. Human nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a little self-criticism is good, but, when we beat ourselves down to a ridiculous degree, it's like, would you treat a friend like this? If not, then stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those ones, are the main ones for me.
Yeah, no, those are all.
What about you?
Yeah, those are good ones. One that always, I feel like I'd have to have them all in front of me, which I have the first books saved just in my phone, because every once in a while I just, as a gratefulness practice, I just try and read through them and try and just remember, because this is the other thing. What I almost hate is mentioning the rules, because I feel like if somebody was to read just the rules themselves, just the headlines of what the rules are of both books, they would be almost worse off than not reading the rules and not reading the book, because the chapters that go with the rules almost say so much more, and it's so much more encompassing than what that rule is. It's almost just like the very starting point, right? And then there's so much more to them that I feel like, one of my favorites is don't hide things in the fog, right? Like that one hits me so deep, and it's something that lesson, I've been learning that lesson over the last probably 6 years or so, like of just how bad I was at that one. Just personally, that one, I was so good at it. I feel like that is a mark of if you were an intellectual person and you have a high functioning mind that runs at a mile a minute, that is a gift, but it can also be a curse, because you also get really good at lying to yourself. If you're very logical, and I just want to speak to myself, I don't want to speak to other people, but for myself, I find that I'm very good at using logic, and I can apply that logic willingly. And sometimes I can paint pictures using that logic that is very sound and is hard to poke holes in, but I'm lying to myself even still, because I can find better logic that encompasses more things, that is more true, and highlights the fact that logic, this whole logic game I had set up for something, was only due to hide it in the fog, right? To hide myself from seeing the full version of it and taking full accountability myself. So that rule always sticks out to me, that don't hide things in the fog. But yeah, a million of them. Don't bother kids when they're skateboarding. I feel like hearing an adult that has done things in the world come out and say that and know the meaning of it was something that I always felt and really was upset about growing up, of just people not valuing it, of just how beautiful the inner child is, and what a travesty it is for people to lose that. And the entire world is trying to crush that inner child out of you and fit you into this box of just a worker bee of what that is. You don't need to be a part of that. There is systems that have trillions and trillions of dollars behind them working at that goal. You never need to aid that. You need to be working against that and trying to foster that flame and throw some more tinder on it and blow on it and bring these kids through that tough time, through high school, through university, and get them out on the other side still with that intact. I think that one's amazing. Like you said, I think if I keep going, I'll
what's so interesting? You mentioned, as you were thinking, I actually feel like there's a huge connection between the fog one, don't hide things in the fog, with one of his original rules, which is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient, which is probably my number one. It defines my entire life.
Yeah.
And I feel like we do that. They connect in the sense that so many times what we do is we hide the long-term benefit in the fog. So for example, if I was to be like, I can't deal with 3 years of law school, like I would logic my way out. I'd say they shouldn't get my money if they're going to indoctrinate me,
Yeah.
And then I'd hide in the fog the meaning behind that, like what I'm really going to get out of it. So I feel like those two go amazingly hand in hand. And we do that all the time to do what's easy rather than what's really going to pay off long-term.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wanted to start a podcast for years and years and years, but in my head, I was just telling myself, oh, you can only start a podcast if you have some sort of fame to start off of. Right. And I was hiding that in the fog. I was just, using that logical fallacy to prevent myself from realizing the fact that I really wanted to chase this dream. And if I ever allowed myself to realize that, then I know that the only thing holding me back is me. And that was a scary realization to come to, but it's just one of those things where you, at a certain point, if you want to move forward and you want to find, happiness or whatever you want to call that word, satisfaction, you're going to have to ask those questions. You're going to have to look in that fog. You're going to have to, grab your big leaf blower and blow that shit away and find out what it is, or else you're going to run smack dab into this sword poking out that you were intentionally not seeing. Oh, that's one.
Absolutely.
And, do what is meaningful and not expedient. I really enjoy that one too. And I see what you're saying. I don't know exactly how to articulate what that connection is, but there's definitely that connection there. That's one of those ones. And then another one, I'm not sure.
Well, it's the sense of like the way go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay.
My podcast. You go ahead.
Well, to me, the connection is that we hide the meaning in the fog. Like that's what we hide, right? So we want to just do what's expedient, what's easy. So we hide, the deeper meaning in the fog, and then we just go with doing what's easy. And then we hide away this idea of, okay, no, but if we go the alternate route, we're going to succeed long-term. It's going to, get meaning out of this, whatever. Right.
Which this is actually, we were saying the same thing, just in different language, funnily enough. What I was saying is I don't think this is a rule in itself, but it's something he talks about a lot. And it might be a rule. I'm just might not be thinking of it, but just the idea of iterative games moving forward, of looking at yourself long-term and stretching out and thinking of yourself, but your future self and that framework itself, right? It's more of a framework than a rule, but of just understanding that is so important to realize that the decisions you make now, switching off that keeping in mind that long-term game and the iterations of your future self, and how the effect now of the things the delayed gratification now for things in the future, and balancing that, I feel like is so important. And I feel like that is the trap that so many people are stuck in, of just, if I look around at my hometown, so many people are just in that constant state of just buying the new quad and the new thing and all these things, which is fine in itself. And if that's what you want to do, that's great. And for some people it is, but then some people, it is just not taking into account because they're scared. They'd rather keep their true desires and what they want to do in the fog. And they do that by just spending, instead of having money to invest in yourself and to move on, I'm just going to, as soon as it comes in, I'm going to spend it, because now I don't have to think about this. I don't have to, it's one of those things. I feel like just that understanding, that framework of thinking of yourself as an infinite game, and that there's constant effects down the future that you need to always be thinking of in that moment with the decisions that you're making. I feel like that is, if nobody reads anything else or gets anything else out of that, that will take you a long way. Right. I just thought of another rule that I think again, I can never remember the name of the actual rule, but the one about, finding something to aim at and aiming at it with everything you have, and then it'll eventually get you to your next thing that you can aim at. Because I feel like I have such a high value on momentum. And, if you chase something, even if what you end up doing, it might not be that in the effort of chasing something and chasing it with passion, it's going to open up other doors, and it's going to bring you to places and give you opportunities that you never saw. And I feel like there's such power in that, aiming at something and chasing whatever you have, and then re-aiming once you get there. You're never going to hit it, but then you can aim better at the next one and the next one. You always just keep something in front of you that keeps you moving forward. It's going to keep opening doors. And I feel like that is so powerful. And I've seen time and time again how actionable that is and how much impact that really has on people's lives. And if they do that, it's those people that just get stuck in a rut or find this one job that they just, no, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and everything comes to a standstill. That's when you stop digging. That's when the real unhappiness and that deep-seated icky feeling can really seep in, is when you hit those levels. And I think that happens with student debt. I think that can happen with family. I think that can happen for so many reasons that will bog you down in that. And I think to always make that an imperative, that you're always having something to shoot for, something that's dragging you forward, that it doesn't matter what happens in life, you're always going to keep on that. And don't ever let yourself settle into complacency. I feel like that is such an important rule. And I feel like that maybe me adding more of my pizzazz to what his rule was. I think his rule kind of went in a little bit different, but that's what I got out of it. And I feel like that was very important to me, of something, again, I was already doing, which I found when I read these books, I feel like I was already doing most of the rules. I just hadn't thought of it that way. And maybe hearing it articulate or seeing it articulated that well really added a level of, what's the word? Like you have to do it now. Like once you see it, like responsibility, accountability, that's the one. Got it. Took me a while, got there. Added a level of accountability for these rules, right? It wasn't something, I never found that any of the rules that I read were that revelatory, that I'd never thought of this before, but it's always like, oh yeah, like I agree. Like the whole time I'm reading it, just like, yep. Oh, yep. You're so like, let's go. Yeah. Yeah. Like you're just turning the pages, agreeing with everything and having it written so well, and things that you've thought, but never articulated that well, that added to it. And I found that experience was cool. But then I talk to people that say like, I hadn't really thought of any of these concepts. Every rule was a mind blower, and it actually changed my life. And I've heard so many people talk about how those books changed their life. But I love that regardless if you're in a position where you need these rules, you're in a bad space, you're going down a bad path, it can really pull you out of it. Or you can be on a good path, but just not being as effective or as efficient as you could be, and just have it laid out to you in that way where if you can now take that, you're just going to be even better. And it almost meets you where you're at. And I love that about those writings. You could be anywhere in life from one side of the spectrum to the other. If you find those books, you will find actionable things that will change your life for the better, which then when you see that and you see people attacking him and trying to paint him into all these corners of what it is, it just breaks my heart to see.
Me too.
Absolutely breaks my heart. Oh.
Yeah. No, it's horrible. I mean, regardless of what you think of him or his views, I think you do a disservice to humanity when you suggest that, you know, he's an evil person, because he said, so many people have told him, you've brought me back from the brink of suicide. Yeah. You've given my life purpose. So for someone to have changed people's lives, regardless of what you think of his views, you have to respect that. This is a person that has done real, concrete good. You know, it's a ripple effect. He created this group. He didn't mean to, but he did, right? And that's created so much good. So this person has had such an insane impact on the world that you can't deny, and that I will always be grateful for. And that's what I admire about him. I don't look at him and say, oh, he's so smart, which he is. That's like the thing I admire the least about him. The thing I admire the most is that this person had the courage to put everything on the line to help others.
Yeah.
I think what I see as just the most amazing thing about him.
Yeah. And to me, what my most amazing thing about him is to see somebody that was so sure of himself, maybe not even sure of himself, but so sure of the ideas that he was chasing and the ideas of what he was trying to dig up. Right. And I'm kind of going back to Maps of Meaning more, when he was writing that book of what he was really trying to codify and bring together, and the value that he saw in it from a very young age, and went on this journey of this years long. And you know what life is, and all the detractors that you go through, and all the people that probably told him, what are you doing? Like, just give up on that. You know, but he knew that it was something, and to see him not
falter,
and not kowtow to any of those powers that are trying to tell him along the way, and for it to pay off like it did that far into his, you know, like he never thought, okay, he probably thought, you know what, I'm going to teach for, you know, another 10 years and hang them up, and it's probably never going to amount to much. And maybe in a couple of years, people will find this work and will have an impact and really look back on it fondly. But for it to reach this worldwide acclaim and to have all that. And I just love the idea of somebody sticking so steadfastly to this idea of where they see that value and not be shook by anything and all the things that life can throw at you, which is immense. That just means so much to me, because I think personally, I see a lot of it because that's what I feel with this podcast is I have so many people telling me, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? You have an amazing job. Like, why are you wasting your time? You know, like at every turn people are saying, but it's like, I am so sure about what this is going to be one day and where I'm taking this and the journey that I'm on. Like, I just, even if it takes me 30 years for it ever to be what I want it to be, I don't care, because I'm so sure of it. And I just feel like I think that I get to see how hard it is every day to not give up and to, you know, say, fuck all the people that think it differently. Oh, nobody wants to listen to 3 hours and all this stuff. Just turn it off. Like, if you believe in it, that's all that matters. If you believe in yourself and what you think you can do, that's all you need. You know, the rest of it is all gravy. If you get it, great. If you don't, who cares? If you believe in it, right? Like, people keep asking me, well, how's the podcast doing? Like, is it getting lots of views? And it's like, it almost doesn't matter, because I'm so proud of the episodes themselves that it doesn't matter if 5 people see it or 5,000 people see it. If they do see it, they're going to be impressed, and there's something there, and the content is something I'm proud of. And now eventually, if there's value in it, people will find it. It might take a long time, but people will find it. All I got to concentrate on is making sure there's value, right? I feel like as soon as you get caught up in trying to make sure that everybody sees it and you're promoting it and you know, shoving it down people's throats. I think you saw it when I first joined the Peterson Pals group. I didn't want to even admit, even though I'm so proud of this podcast, I didn't want to talk about it. I just feel icky, because I want the content to stand on its own 2 feet. And I feel like that's what Jordan Peterson did so beautifully, was believe in his content and allow it. He wasn't out there proselytizing, other than in his classrooms for people that signed up to come in there. He wasn't doing that. It naturally brought itself to its natural conclusion, which is helping 1 million people around the world and bringing people back from the brink of suicide. And arming people with the tools that they need to navigate this really, really nasty, tough suffering of a life, which unfortunately is what we're, all up against. And I feel like that is so noble. And that's what I think I hold the highest esteem of what I think Jordan Peterson is and what he does for people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And it brings me to this like somewhat related thought. I don't know if it's unrelated, but it's that I feel like one of the things that, young people sort of ignore nowadays, or maybe don't pay enough attention to, is focusing on process. And I know that sounds so crazy, but we're focused so much on ends. And like, I have a lot of friends that like call me crazy all the time because like I condensed my degree and it was an insane amount of work. And they're like, how the hell did you do that? How are you not dead? Yada, yada, yada. And I've done like a lot of crazy shit and I manage my time, but I do so much crap. And it's that I think what it is, and I'm not 100% sure, but this also goes back to parenting too. And when my parents would praise me, my parents would never really praise me for like a good grade or like some sort of end, right? Like the end goal. It would be, in my university career, for example, my dad would come in at 4 a.m. if I'm working on a paper, like prior to handing it in, and be like, I'm really proud of you right now, in moments when I'm just exerting effort. So I learned that the connection, it's really not about what comes out of it. It's like, are you putting everything you have into it? And are you learning? And are you enjoying the process? And I did. I became addicted to it. The most proud moments I have in my university experience are literally, I'm not even going to my graduation. It's an online thing. I don't even care. Because that has no meaning. Like I look back and my fondest memories are the nights where I'm dying and I'm crying because this paper is absolutely killing me. But then at the end, the relief and the pride that you feel. And I feel like if we just instilled that in people and brought them back to that, and that kind of goes with what Peterson says, just aim at something. It doesn't really matter because the end is going to change, but just work in the meantime, right? Put all of your might into something. I think that is key because that's the one thing you can control, but you can never control the ends. So if you're focused on ends all the time and outcomes, you're going to be disappointed time and time again.
Yeah. And what a gift that is that, parenting, you can give so many gifts to kids. But I think that's one of those ones where if you can teach someone what you're doing there is instilling good values, right? Like I feel like society, what society's trying to tell you is that the value is the ends. It's the amount of money in your bank account, it's the car you drive, right? And it's just setting you up, right? That worked great for society because society wants worker bees that are just going to go up, get the paycheck, do the things, and not chase those passions. But if you value the passion and the working hard, now you can apply that to whatever you want. And it's such a skill and you're not so caught up. It allows you to think for yourself, because I think when you're so caught up on the money and all that, right? Like I did, I didn't think about what I wanted to do. I just thought about, everything I've been told is that the more money you make, the better you're doing. Right. So I thought I'm going to get a business degree, and I do love business. And my dad was a businessman. I love watching him do it, but I wasn't chasing what I wanted at all. Right. I was just chasing what I thought I was told to want. Right. And I got to see how that feels. And I'm currently getting to see how that feels. And it's very different. And I feel like I'm now, those lessons that you got instilled within you from a young age, I'm now learning that lesson at 27, 28 years old, right? Of, oh, what do I actually value? I'm gonna have to ask myself these questions of, do I value that money that much? Because I don't really think so. Like the happiest I've ever been, I was living in a residence at university in a 6x6 room made of concrete with a bed and a computer. And I was completely fine and never been happier. I don't need all the bells and whistles and all that stuff. I do like that. And I think I'd be hiding some things in the fog if I didn't pretend. I didn't like my bougie things, and I grew up very privileged, and I want to still do that. And I do have a very high, I do value money, but I've found that I value making money in a certain way where I'm making money right now doing what I do, but it doesn't reward me in that way because I'm not making money following my values. I'm at times breaking my values to make money, and I hate it. It kills me. And I'm finding that I'm reevaluating the relationship with the monetary reward and finding what that is, right? And seeing people like Joe Rogan, like Elon Musk, they have better whys. They're chasing money. They're accumulating wealth, but in a beautiful way. And am I doing that? No, I'm not. I'm not helping anybody. I don't bring good into the world with what I do. And before that never would have bugged me, but now that does eat at me. And having this rewards me in such a different way, right? Not monetarily at all. Absolute money pit, right? Like it's expensive. All this stuff is expensive. It's not making any money, but I love it to death. And it rewards me in such a different way. And it's just so interesting to see what those values are. But I just think that parents should know, parents should be educated on what those gifts they can give, like what a different life they're setting their children up for by what they value. Because you can set a kid on a path of chasing passions and hard work like you did, or you can set them on a path of chasing monetary and then let them figure it out on their own. You're always going to figure it out on your own, but you can just save them so much suffering in the meantime with what you can. But how do you know that if you never experienced that, right? Like both my parents were told, go make money and be successful. That's what lessons they had. So that's what they impart on. And you can't blame for that. They're doing the best they can with the knowledge they have and what's available to them. It's fascinating. I think that's just one of those things where we're evolving so fast as a species and as society right now that we're just catching up with, okay, what have we missed? What lessons do we need to impart, right? Like things are just moving so fast right now. It's hard to take that time to find out what we're throwing out and what we're not. Almost reminds me of another one of my favorite rules of Jordan Peterson of, do not denigrate institutions without fully understanding.
Yes.
Like I can't remember the actual thing, but I just love that. I feel like things move so fast lately that we, dump entire institutions like religion without even realizing what that was stabilizing, what that was holding up. And then things start going to shit. We're like, hey, why'd this happen? It's like, well, he just threw out, something that's been a part of humanity for thousands of years.
Marriage.
Marriage. Exactly. Right. Like so many of these things that are just getting absolutely attacked, and whatever social currency is allowed, you can attack religion all you want, as long as it's, not certain religions you can't go after, but which is so funny to me as well. But it's just one of those things. I don't know. I don't know.
I agree. And I think another misconception too is that effort doesn't equate to money. And I think that in the majority of cases it does. I really do think that because we live in a free market, there's something for everyone. Yeah. Like every field, we need people in it, right? Like every single field, the creative arts, like everything. So I really do think that in any field, if you work hard enough, you can make passable or fantastic amount of money in that field. Even fields that you just look at and you're like, oh, money pit. If you put enough effort into it, the money comes incidentally. So I really think if people just stopped and focused on effort, like the money will come. Now, of course, it's going to come more in certain areas than others. Absolutely. But generally speaking, we don't live in a society where it's easy to just get broke and work your ass off. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think that's something, and I think also because of that, I think there's just I think you can take that even further, is if that holds true, that if you put effort, the money will come. Why not put effort where your passion lies?
Exactly.
So many people just choose, right? Like, oh, I'm going to choose lawyer because I know that there's money there, right? And I'm going to put my effort towards this. But if you don't truly love, you don't have passion behind that, the effects aren't going to be what you think it's going to be, right? You might get money out of it, but you're going to be bringing a lot more than just money. You're inviting some dark things into your life if you follow that. Why not find something you're passionate? If you love horses, you'll find a way to make money with horses. Just follow that passion. But you can't forget the effort piece. That's a very important piece. But when you combine that effort with that passion, no bad things can come of that. No bad things.
I completely agree. And the other thing too is that, and this is more on a benefits levels. When you think about it, like, do you want a doctor or a lawyer helping you who doesn't really give a shit about what they do? Right?
Or a teacher. Holy
that's probably the biggest one. Like, you're actually doing more harm than good, because you're not putting your all into it, no matter what. If you're not passionate, you're not giving it your best.
And I know at least 30 people that went into university with a different idea in their head, got disenfranchised for whatever reason, and just went into ed as their backup and don't love it and are now graduated and hate teaching. And that breaks my heart. But when did teaching become this just anybody can do it, hop into it? That should be something that you love and you have passion for, because the amount of you want to talk about those positive ripples that we talked about earlier that go out, the amount of negative ripples that can happen from a bad teacher. I'm sure everybody listening to this right now has had that one experience. I'm sure you had amazing teachers too, but I'm sure you had that one that just didn't want to be there and was a shithead, and the negative impact and the ramifications that can have on forming minds is unbearable. And I think teachers need to be paid more. I think education degrees need to be more difficult. I think they need to add more things into them. I have a whole, we could do a whole 3-hour podcast on all my thoughts there, but I think that's one of the biggest ones where you look at that and you see real consequences of just having it be that fallback degree, or that just, I know there's easy money there and my summer's off and that's what I'm going to go into. If you don't go into that with love and passion for what you do, there's going to be negative outcomes of it.
I completely agree. I think that should just be a general rule with, if you're in a career where you're going to change people's lives and shape them, like lawyer, doctor, like you're performing a surgery, you're teaching a child, massive. It should be leaps and bounds to get there. And you should be proud once you do, but you should be passionate for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I've kept you almost 3 hours now. I had one more question that I wanted to ask you about.
Have you really?
It's almost, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Time just flew.
I'm telling you, that's, it's funny because it got colloquialized on Joe Rogan. We didn't do 3 hours, right? But I always thought that was just something with Joe Rogan, but I've almost to a T, every guest I've kept here 3 hours says, no, that wasn't 3 hours, right? And
that's hilarious.
I know, it's tons of fun. And I think it bodes well for getting more people on there, because I think that's the biggest intimidation factor is the time limit. I'm telling people, you're not even going to realize it. It flies by.
It flies.
But the question I had about it, and the reason, and I'll tell you the reason why I'm curious about this. I'm wondering, you mentioned that with this Peterson Pals group, it's clearly something that means a lot to you and something you're proud of, but the fact that you have to kind of keep it a secret. The reason I asked, I'm wondering how that affects you and kind of how you deal with that. Because for myself, I deal with a similar thing with this podcast and with my job. I find people that have podcasts, right? Like a lot of comedians and stuff, the biggest thing they do is they can talk about their day-to-day, what happened on the road that weekend and what they came in, right? Some of my favorite scientists, they talk about their work at these universities, they can bring it in. I can't talk about my work to the degree that I want to. And one of the biggest goals I have of this podcast is to be as open and honest with people as I can. And for reasons, I can't talk about that, and I have to keep that separate. And then there's other areas of my life of just, that has nothing to do with work, but because of work, I can't talk about that. And it eats at me. And it's one of the biggest things that day to day weighs on me is that secrecy. And I hate it. And I'm curious how that works with you with this, because it's clearly something you're passionate about. Does it eat at you not to be able to be as open and proud with what you've created? I mean, we all created it, but you did most of the work. You did the hard part. How is that for you?
Oh, great question. Okay, well, first of all, we're going to have to chat at some point because I'm very intrigued with everything you just said.
All right, hey, we can talk all about it. Yeah.
I'm very intrigued.
Yeah.
But yes, it does. I would say mostly in terms of just because it's difficult to lie and to keep track of who knows who doesn't. And this Peterson talks about this. It's like keeping track of your lies is a fucking nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. So that I would say is the hardest, which my friends know, which my friends don't know. If my Facebook is open, if they see a notification on my phone, like, what's that? I want to know. I've had one of those where a person was like, what's that? And I'm like, made up some, crap. Yeah. But I'm completely with you. Now, in terms of like eating me up, the most important people in my life know. Okay. Like my boyfriend is in the group. My parents know. They've been with me from the beginning, from when I created it. The people, in the group know. But for me, the goal is being open in the places that matter. So like mainly school. Like I'm so tired of that. And I think there's a way to not, go to school and say, hey, here's my Facebook group. Mm-hmm. But it all goes hand in hand of just being a little bit more honest. And if I'm really sure that a view is reasonable, raise it in class. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like on a micro level, just be more open. As I said, there's one girl that goes to my law school who's in the Peterson Pals group. Speak to her. Like maybe we can get something going, there, see if we can reach out to people. Yeah. So yeah, that's 100% my goal too, because the thing for me is that it gives me cognitive dissonance. And this is kind of the last thing I'll say is that it's not something to be ashamed of.
Yeah. That's
all. Yeah. Why am I hiding it? It's insane. And I try to act in accordance with my values as much as I can. So me hiding this is like me bowing down to the mob. And I don't like that. Yeah. Because there's nothing shameful about this group. It's fantastic. And everybody under the sun could benefit from it. Yeah. So I'm working on it, but that's a goal of mine as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And that was kind of my thought behind it, because I think there is so much beauty to the group and what you have created. I think it is something to be proud of. And unfortunately, if you were anywhere else but a college campus, there probably wouldn't be any ramifications and you could be completely open. It just happens to be, and it's kind of a two-sided coin in the way now that I think about it, because the only reason the group exists is because of that environment that the college campus creates is the only thing that created the resistance that created this group.
Yep.
And now it's the only thing that holds you back from being able to talk about it. Hey, like it's funny the way the world throws those paradoxes at you, but yeah, no, for sure. I think one day you'll be talking about it like it's nothing, and it might be sooner than you think, because I think, especially now that it's got a little bit of legs and people have seen that, no, there's been a lot of positivity come out of it, and not really any negativity. Who can say shit? But I don't know. They always find a way on a university campus to twist anything into anything, right?
Always do. Yeah, hell yeah. Well, what I should do is get together the hundreds of DMs that I have of people just giving me the most heartfelt messages thanking me. I'll put those in a collage and just send it to them. That's
there you go. I think that's the best way to do it. And you know what? That was something I was really excited to talk to you. I think I reached out to you right when I joined the group, and I just thought, man, this is a cool group that you put together, and you wanted to get a few things in order before you came on. But I find it funny that when I ask somebody on, and for whatever reason, something happens where it gets pushed in the future. Almost every time that happens, I find it's for a really good reason. And something happens in life where it was for the best that it got pushed. And I found that what I was really interested in with interviewing you was that I got to speak to other people that you have touched. And I got to hear from them of, you know, like when I had Ethan on, and then when me and Ethan finished our podcast, he said, "Oh, are you gonna have Alex on?" I said, "Yeah." And just the way he talked about you and, you know, your mindset and your courage and all that, and Cole and all these people, pretty much anyone in that group that I bring you up to, they just speak so glowingly and so highly about you that I was just really excited to have you on and get to see for myself exactly. You know, but I think that's beautiful, and I think that speaks to what you're doing, and I think you just need to lean into that as much as you can, because that's a powerful force, and I think that is something that is usually thrust upon people, that mantle of being that person for whoever is needing that. And I think it's very noble, and the people that you're touching, it's really having an impact. And I think I got to see that. And in speaking with you, I get to see why, because I think you are a very special person. And I just want to thank you again for coming on and allowing this type of conversation to have these types of conversation I'd love to have on this podcast. And I found that this Peterson Pals group has been a godsend to me to find guests for this type of conversation that are, you know, already have their toes in the water, a little bit of, you know, going to these conversations. And I'm sure you'll be on here plenty of times over the next little while. And we'll, you know, today was abortion, but maybe we'll tackle a couple other tough ones in the future. So thank you so much for coming on. I didn't even ask about Ariana Grande. That was the first question on my list. I got to ask that one. I just realized now I missed that. What is the deal here? I always see you posting about it.
Okay.
Break it down for me. Break it down for me before we go.
Okay. Well, I'll try and be quick. Okay. So first,
take all the time you want.
Thank you for all the kind words. No worries. You know, honestly, right back at you. And I don't mean that with, you know, people are almost like, "Oh, you too." No, for real though. I mean, I admire what you're doing. Giving a voice to people, having these conversations. I mean, it's the exact same effect. You're bringing people on, you're showing that dialogue is a good thing. And I think that that's hugely valuable. And I'm glad that the Peterson Pals and your podcast are having a little liaison.
Yeah.
Okay. So with Ariana Grande, oh my goodness, I'll make it brief. Two things with her. The first is that I've always sang since I was little. I used to do musical theater, so I understand what a good voice is. And this chick has one of the greatest voices, like, of the last century, and like top 5, maybe top 3. Her talent is off the charts. Doesn't matter what you think of her music. The second thing is that she's, like, to me, a very insane human role model. Like, people that delve into her will understand that the strife that she went through in personal relationships is insane. And the way that she bounced back, and the way that she deals with fame and like really bad trauma, like, in brief, I don't know if you know anything about her, but she was little. Okay. So she was with somebody for a very long time, Mac Miller.
Yeah. That's the little I know.
Okay. So I love his music as well. And she was, like, completely in love with him. And they were, like, you could see that they were soulmates. Like, it was one of those things. The chemistry was just insane, but he had an addiction. And there's all this evidence that she tried to put him in rehab, and he just did horrifically reckless things. And then she got out of the relationship and rebounded, and then he died, and the entire world blamed his death on her. And that, I can't even fathom what that feels like, to still be in love with someone and to think I'm breaking up with them to help them because I can't help them anymore and it's not good for us. And then to be blamed for a death while grieving. And then the whirlwind romance that you're using to just cope with life, tramples right in front of the whole world. The world sees it come crashing down. It's embarrassing. You get cheated on. We suspect your engagement falls apart. Then you go and in the span of 2 months, where most people take years, you make one of the greatest albums of your entire discography. You win insane amount of awards and you use music to heal. And then you pull back. This is what she did. She goes on tour, but then she pulls back and she talks about all the time, I just did therapy. She's off social media. She's not doing a lot of posting. She heals and then she gets what she deserves. She finds someone, and this is why I posted her wedding picture today, because she found someone that was normal after she had healed. He's a real estate agent. Like, he doesn't give a shit about clout. His Instagram is private. You can already just tell that this person doesn't care what anyone thinks of him. And again, I'm obviously speculating, but for her to have gone through all that trauma and to just healed and not given up and not been really a bitch to anyone, and talk about going to therapy and use music to heal and provide music to people to help them heal. Like, her music has healed me in so many ways. I think she deserves the absolute world. And even if you don't like her music, you can look at her as a beacon of hope that no matter what, you will make it through. And also you will find love. You will find love. Even if you feel like a breakup is like the end of all things, it's not. Whew. That's all.
Well, I'm glad I didn't miss. I was just about to wrap it up, and I saw my first question on my list here was Ariana Grande ? Because I knew I had to ask. I knew there'd be a story there. That's so funny. Oh, that's great. Well, now actually, I think you spoke so well on her behalf. I think she has now gained another fan, and I might have to go check her out. Does she ever do any podcasts? Does she ever put herself out there? Because I'm a podcast
There's
guy.
some good interviews that I can send.
Yeah? Okay. Well, you have to send me a couple, because now you've piqued my interest, and since you spoke so highly of her and you come so highly recommended, I have to take it seriously.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. I'm sure we'll do this again soon. And
absolutely,
I really enjoyed that conversation. That was a really fun one. That was, I didn't know what to expect. Didn't know where the conversation was go, but I knew if me and you got together, wherever that conversation went, it would be fun.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. This was super fun.
Awesome. Well, we'll do it again here soon. Have a good night.
That was amazing. Thank you. You too. See ya.
Right. See you.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I really enjoyed it and have been, like I said in the intro, just waiting on bated breath to release it. And I have probably 4 or 5 other episodes just like that I can't wait for you guys to hear. And those will be coming out soon and getting some really good ones recorded. So I don't know if you guys think it's getting better, but it feels like it's getting better to me. And it feels like the comfortability and just the topics that we're getting into on these podcasts is just really going in the way I want to see it. And I'm really happy and really thankful for all the ups and the downs and all the things that go into it and all the COVID and all this shit. It just makes you stronger. And I think that's just a good mindset. I haven't, I'd be lying to you guys if I said I was always thankful, but I think in this moment when I'm recording this outro, I'm thankful right now. That does not mean I have been thankful as I should have been throughout the whole thing. And I think that's just about, that's the game. No matter how hard it gets and how, rough shit looks, if you can go through it being thankful, you're doing good. And it's tough and you're going to fail at it, but you just got to keep trying and getting better at staying thankful and staying in that plane, regardless of what's going on around you. And I meant a metaphysical plane, not an actual plane, not an airplane, in case you're confused. Sorry. I don't know where I'm going on this. Do all the things, follow all this, the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, boom, ba, boo, LinkedIn. Don't think I have LinkedIn. Don't follow that. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope you guys have a great week. And I hope you guys get to see some people you haven't seen for a long time, reunite with some family, kiss some puppies, pet some babies, all that fun stuff. Get on it. Enjoy the week. Crush it. Kill it. You got this. I got this. We all got this. And I will see you on the next one. All right. Bye, freak shows.